This podcast is brought to you on Roku and Fire TV by Pod Nation Podcast TV. Find us on X, Facebook, Instagram, or wherever podcasts are broadcast. Download our app and never miss a show with video on demand, as well as exclusive content found only on Pod Nation TV. Live from London, England, it's the Monster Island Film Vault, episode 104, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, 1974, featuring Robert Kelly. Hello, Kaiju Lovers, and welcome to the Monster Island Film Vault, a podcast seeking entertainment and enlightenment through tokusatsu. I am your host, Monster Island's traveling film curator, Nate Marchand. Will you stop worrying about Jimmy? All right? He'll be fine. I know it's been a while, but he'll be fine. Okay, I only understood about 3/4 of that. I'm getting better with my jet speak, but it's I get it. You're agitated. You want Jimmy back on the air. Hey, calm the heck down, okay? I'll get a hold of him if it helps you feel any better, okay? Jeez. We all love Jimmy. I get it. All right. But today, barring any more interference from JJ over there, I am here to continue what will unfortunately be the final Godzilla Redux episode of Season 4 of MIFV, but for such an occasion, I had to bring back my friend, you know him, you love him, the co-host of Record All Monsters, and apparently a fugitive? I think, given what happened in the previous episode? He's got some splaining to do. Robert Kelly of Record All Monsters.
Hello, Nate, Jet. Good to see y'all again.
Yes, and I see that you're here, but where's the wife?
Well, she was able to get back home to Texas.
Okay.
But somebody had to stay behind and pick up the ransom money.
Pick up the ransom? Am I going to be getting a summons to a British court?
Not if you stop asking me questions.
Got it. All right, let's move on, shall we? Because plausible deniability is a thing, even though I do know a really good lawyer. His name's not Matt. His name's not Matt, though. But he's still a really good lawyer. All right, so, as I mentioned, you're here for the last Godzilla Redux of Season 4. I know, we're all a little bit sad about that, but it's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 1974.
Yes.
It's a great one to go out on. Sometimes I wish that I could have done Terror, so that way Season 4 could end with the Showa era. But that just gives me Terror to look forward to at the start of Season 5.
Yeah. And if people want to hear you talk about Terror of Mechagodzilla, that was the Season 2 finale of Record All Monsters.
Ooh, shameless self-promotion. I like.
Oh, yeah. You were my guest there.
Yep.
And we talked. That's one of our longer episodes in terms of interview portion. Usually the long episodes are because I wrote a very long essay. But that time we just couldn't shut up.
No, we could not. I mean, it was my first Godzilla movies. It's still one of my favorites to this day. So I had a lot to say about it. And I was on Kaiju Weekly for an episode about it. So, it's one of the movies that I get a lot of requests to be on for, or that I request to be on for. So, like I said, got a lot to say, but, that'll be the start of Season 5. We are talking about its immediate predecessor, and there is some finality with this one, as we'll get into. A lot of people who worked on this was their last Godzilla film, which, like I said, we'll be getting into. But the reason I wanted to have you on, Robert, is you had one of the most fascinating takes on this movie that I have ever seen. And that's hard to do because I've heard a lot of takes on a lot of Godzilla movies. And just when I thought I'd heard them all, here you come along Now, if I remember correctly, I became familiar with it because of of your article in Kaiju Ramen, may it rest in peace. But that was originally your script, your essay script for your podcast, correct?
Yes, and it was slightly edited for print.
I know, because I edited it.
Yeah. Well, not just that, but like
I know.
I made some changes, and it's slightly different from how it appeared on the podcast, slightly different from how it appeared in Kaiju Ramen, and slightly different in how it appeared in the book version of the show.
Yes.
Minor differences across the board. But yes, this was my first Godzilla movie. I grew up with it. I could watch this movie 4 times instead of sleeping. You know, I could, you know, if there was a way to breathe it, that would probably be better for me than oxygen.
That's very poetic. I like it.
I've had this movie's babies, is what I say in the book.
Again, very poetic.
And Record All Monsters was one of those babies. Throughout my whole life, you know, the name of the essay was Godzilla and Me, A Lifetime of Friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. Godzilla has been one of my best friends since I was 3.
Mm-hmm.
And my love of Godzilla is a huge part of my identity. And that's important because identity is such a key theme in this film. And that's where my take begins.
Okay. Which we will definitely be getting into. You know, that's an excellent preamble. There's a lot of things to talk about with this. I think people underestimate this movie at least a little bit, but the 70s Godzilla movies for a long time seemed like they were grossly underestimated, and it's been, except maybe Terror, because it's a Shiro Honda, so people gave that one more grace than they did the rest of them. Yeah, gave it a pass. But this one, well, I should say the other 70s movies, it's been popular to reevaluate them, even Megalon, to my surprise. You know, so this one, I think, has a lot more to say than people realize, which I will be getting into because of all, you know, it's set on Okinawa. And if you know the immediate history that was going on in Japan with Okinawa, it gets even more fascinating. This was probably the movie, other than maybe Godzilla versus Gigan, that my previous podcast life really opened my eyes to. Because once I knew all the stuff that was going on with Okinawa at the time, which I'll detail when we get into it, I see this movie in a whole other light. It's a very, very different light. So let's stop beating around the bush and get into this, right?
Yeah.
Alrighty, Robert. But first, before we get into all of the juicy bits, as the guest, can you tell us what happens in this movie while I have Jet play some epic Godzilla music of some kind? You know, maybe a little Masaru Sato. We'll find out.
Yeah. So, according to the back of my Star Maker VHS, it's a reissue of the New World one. According to legend, when the people of Okinawa are in danger, a monster will appear to save them. The legend is put to the test when a monstrous cyborg threatens to destroy Earth. Controlled by evil space invaders, Mechagodzilla rises from the sea and begins a ferocious rampage of death and destruction. And even Godzilla is outmatched by his mechanical double. But as the battle rages, a team of archaeologists is racing against time to unlock an ancient secret. And at a magical shrine, their work proves successful. Out of a seaside rock emerges the immense and powerful King Caesar. The monster quickly joins Godzilla in a battle of gigantic proportions, but can King Caesar and Godzilla prevent the destruction of the Earth? Can mere flesh and blood overcome 50 tons of mechanized and menacing space titanium? Will the ancient legend prove true? The answers lie in the stunning, earth-shattering conclusion. of Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. Color, running time, 84 minutes.
That last bit, it was the perfect exclamation point, understated exclamation point right there for that. I love it. And you know what's crazy? I recognize a lot of that back cover copy because I think I don't think I had specifically the Star Maker VHS, but it sounds vaguely familiar. They might have recycled that for another VHS.
Well, the New World issue, which was the first time it was released in the US on VHS.
1988, according to my research.
Yes. So the New World one had the same exact copy. Star Maker released it exactly the same, except they put a gold edging around the sides.
Yep.
And their logos on the bottom. Otherwise, it's exactly the same as the New World one. And I think the Anchor Bay one just had the same back copy.
Yeah, whoever wrote that deserves some royalties.
Honestly, it's a pretty good summary. Like, it really lets you in on what to expect.
Yeah, for sure.
It even talks about, the human story, which I do find to be one of the more compelling for the 70s Godzilla movies. Mm-hmm. Like, it's actually pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. It's very much an ensemble. There are a lot of characters in this, but we'll be getting into that. But before we do, and I do this might be a good spot for you to talk a little bit about what you do in that essay. But I wanted to start this off by asking how each of us initially discovered this movie. I'll tell mine really quick because it's not going to take that long, and I know yours is going to be a little bit more involved. But my discovery of this movie was kind of humorous. As I mentioned before, my first Godzilla film was Terror of Mechagodzilla, but I only caught the back half of it when it was on TV.
Right.
So, then that got me curious, and I started going and finding other movies, buying them, watching them, and all that. I was a little bit obsessed with finding Terror of Mechagodzilla, because I wanted to see that first half of it. I wanted to complete it. So I also knew at this point that some of the movies had been released under different titles, so I was kind of prepared for that. I come across this in a VHS 2-pack at a Kmart of all places. Remember those? And I was like, oh, that must be the one that I saw on TV and I never got to finish it. This will be great. Brought it home, stuck it in. I don't know how long it took me to figure out that it wasn't the same movie. But at some point, I think, 10 or 15 minutes, maybe. I'm like, I don't think this is the same movie. I don't know these don't look like the same characters. It doesn't feel the same. Like, nothing here feels quite right. And so it was kind of a bittersweet first encounter, because on one hand, I'm like, yay, I discovered another Godzilla movie I didn't know about. This is great. But I was also disappointed that it wasn't Terror. So I'm like, I still want to see the first half of it. So, so there was that. The other funny story that I'll tell, this wasn't for the first viewing, but it was, it's still a funny story. There was a subsequent viewing I had of the movie, and it gets to the singing scene, which we will have to talk about.
Yes.
So it gets the King Caesar song, and it starts playing, and my mother pokes her head in. You got to understand, my mother is a singer with perfect pitch. So there are recorded instances where people will say, "Oh, this person is such a wonderful singer." It could be a popular singer, okay? My mother will listen to him and say, "They're awful." So here I am watching this. This girl starts singing. My mom pokes her head in and says, "Why is that girl singing off key?" I'm like, only you would notice that, Mom. Only you. So ever since then, it's been kind of ruined for me. Every time I watch the movie and it gets to that part, I'm paying even closer attention to how she's singing, and I keep wondering, Is she bad? I don't know anymore. Oh, that's my
As a professional singer myself,
I'll keep my mother away from you.
please
Just
do.
in case.
Don't let her hear my new single, Scared to Death, coming out January 24th. Uh,
Oh,
uh,
oh man. But anyway, so that's my story. Tell us about yours.
so my story, it is very involved, and I've told it in a lot of places, so I'll keep it not necessarily brief, but you know, the pared down version is when I was 3 years old and I just started school. Every Friday, my family would go grocery shopping, and then we'd have 15 minutes to go into Hollywood Video, which was just across the street from the grocery store. And as a 3-year-old, I was obsessed with dinosaurs, like all good 3-year-olds. And I had rented all the tapes they had of the ABC show Dinosaurs, which had been kind of my big thing that I would check out at that time. And this was one of the first times I ventured out of the kids section.
Ooh, dangerous
And
territory.
yeah,
This is like your own little version of the hero's journey. It's like you getting out of the kids section at Hollywood Video.
it really is. And there's a lot of stuff I remember seeing on my way there, but this caught my eye. The two covers I remember most though were this one, which is the Star Maker VHS. It's not the same one, obviously, but I did make sure when I was collecting the Godzilla movies on VHS that is the copy of this film I got. And the other cover I remember is Planet of the Dinosaurs, because I think that was also when I realized that I was a heterosexual boy.
Isn't that one of those ones that's notorious for being a G-rated movie with nudity in it? Or am I thinking of another dinosaur movie?
Well, that's Baby, the Lost Lost Legend.
Sure.
That's rated PG, and Sean Young is topless through a portion of it. No, Planet of the Dinosaurs, just the cover has all the female characters scantily clothed, despite them being fully clothed throughout pretty much the whole movie. I think someone wears a bikini top at one point, and that's as scandalous as it gets. But so yeah, I saw these two dinosaur movies, and one had a dinosaur and a robot dinosaur. I couldn't read particularly well, but I was a good little Catholic boy, so I recognized God. And I was able to sound out the rest of it, Zilla, right? And then I pick it up and I turn it over, and not only is there a dinosaur on the cover and a robot dinosaur, on the back cover, there's a monkey with a gun. So... what could I do?
Monkey with a gun. That sounds like a movie title unto itself.
I asked my mom if I could get this one, and I actually talked to her about this on my episode about this movie. And she says that she really had to think about it, because this was the first time I was asking to get something that wasn't like, a compilation of cartoons or whatever. She said yes, and I went home and I showed my dad. I was really excited, and he was like, yeah, there are a bunch of Godzilla movies, and that just blew my mind. And I hadn't even watched it yet. So because there were 4 kids, I had 3 older sisters, and there were 4 of us, and so the way we did it, the 2 older girls would flip a coin to see which of their movies we watched Friday night, or Saturday night, and the 2 younger, my sister and I would flip a coin to see who watched the movie that night. And I lost the coin flip. Because I always bet tails. So I never changed it up. I always did tails. Because the tails never fails, Made perfect sense to my 3-year-old self. If it rhymes, it must be true. So I lost. And we watched my sister's movie, which I want to say was The Never-Ending Story.
Oh.
which I know we had seen before at that point, like something we watched a lot when I was younger. But I was too excited about my movie, so I woke up at like 5 in the morning and snuck down to the TV on Saturday morning. I did this sometimes already to watch cartoons early, and I knew that if I kept the light off, turned the TV on, and made sure the volume was set to 3, I could hear it from about 2 or 3 feet away, but it wouldn't be able to be heard any further than that.
Clever boy.
So, yeah. So I snuck in there and I kept the light off, turned the TV down, put the tape in, and it starts within a few seconds, and it's the drums over the Toho logo. And then you see Anguirus, and I was captured in those seconds. And then the very next thing you see is a beautifully dressed lady singing a song, and she starts screaming and having visions of other monsters. I was just completely hooked. And I watched the whole thing that morning, rewound it, put it back where it was, went back to bed, and we watched it as a family that night. So I got to see it twice that first day that I had it. And it was just literally a life-changing experience.
Yeah, so that's why for you, as you said earlier, Godzilla has been your friend.
Yes, because one, this is how I met the character.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a hero whose heroic bona fides are in question at the start of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like we find out, oh, he's fighting his friend. He shouldn't be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first I've seen of Godzilla, so I only have what the movie is telling me for context. And the fact that it's something pretending to be Godzilla to be able to do these terrible things. Godzilla's being framed, essentially. That somehow resonated with me. I was a weird kid. I'm still a weird kid. I'm just 30-something and big. And I didn't realize it at that time. But this was laying the groundwork for a lot of how I look at things, or a lot of how I would be able to engage with art and storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things I talk about in the essay is, Godzilla is a monster and expected to act monstrous when it's really Mechagodzilla, but they think it's Godzilla starting to destroy things. There's a moment of disbelief and then just acceptance. And again, I didn't really realize it. Being Hispanic in a very German town with a lot of prejudice against Hispanic people.
Mm-hmm.
There was a Klan rally. The year before I rented this movie for the first time, there was a Klan rally here.
Man.
And Louis Beam Jr., who was the head of the KKK in Texas, lives in this town, still to this day. So I was experiencing things that I didn't have a word for, a real understanding of until much later. But that resonated with me through Godzilla. Like, they just assumed, even though he was the good guy because he was a monster, well, then of course he's doing these terrible things. And then Godzilla, like other timeless characters before him, like Cinderella, or, I don't know, the guy who, the thumb in the pie guy.
Tom Thumb? No.
Maybe? No. But Tom Thumb's a good example.
Okay.
A good example. Through things that are considered weaknesses or liabilities, the things that made him... I was thinking of Tom Thumb. I don't know why I thought about Jack Horner with his pie.
Oh, yeah, Jack Horner. I was just looking. I was trying to double check that before Jet decided to correct me.
I don't know. But like Cinderella or Babe, or like any number of, kind of classic heroes that are outside of the hero's journey narrative, but part of this kind of like older, simpler folklore, Godzilla's justified by his flaws, what are considered his flaws by society, by the peers. Cinderella is timid, Tom Thumb is little, Godzilla is a monster. But these are the qualities, Cinderella's humility is what makes her stand out at the ball. Tom Thumb's smallness causes him to be underestimated. Godzilla's monstrousness is what allows him to defeat Mechagodzilla, because he is the real monster, but he's on our side.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, again, I didn't have that thought at 3 years old. Sitting in a W, which I still have knee and ankle problems from that, I would sit that way as a kid. I didn't think about any of that. I just thought Godzilla was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And I still think that.
Mm-hmm.
So Godzilla means a hell of a lot to me, and this movie is what started that. And so this movie means a lot to me. And the kind of person I am means that I'm always comparing stories, looking for commonalities. I'm a huge fan of G.K. Chesterton. He did this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph Campbell, also.
Hero of a Thousand Faces. Yep.
Yeah, he did this a lot, boiling things down kind of to their bones and then looking at the skeletons next to each other. There's the old joke that I opened the essay with, that there's only 3 stories. Man goes on a journey, a stranger comes to town, and Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. But what is interesting is when you look at that joke, Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla kind of is the intermediate between those 2 stories, because the man on a journey is the stranger coming to town, and Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla is you're meeting yourself. And do you like what you see? Are you opposing it? Are you the monster? And if so, what kind of monster?
Mm-hmm. I brought up a similar observation in my Godzilla versus Gigan episode with Danny DeManna, where I talked about the scene where Godzilla comes face to face with the Godzilla Tower, and he's confused by it. He even hits himself in the head. Is like, what am I actually looking at? Is that really me?
Yeah.
And the way I interpreted it is that this is the true Godzilla looking at a hyper commercialized version of himself that he doesn't recognize, and likened that to how Shinichi Sekizawa, because that was the last full script that he wrote for the Godzilla series. He was involved with this one, which we'll get into. It was his meta commentary on how Godzilla was being treated as a pop culture icon at the time, which, you want to hear me unpack that whole thing, go listen to the episode. So I know exactly what you're talking about here.
Yeah. It's so much like an expansion of that idea, that second in that film. This is the whole movie of that. Godzilla, when he pops up out of that building, when we see the real Godzilla, for the first time, and he confronts the fake Godzilla, and he steps back and he sees the shoulder with the metal in it, and he tilts his head kind of like a curious puppy, It's that same kind of moment. He's like, okay, I knew something was wrong. That's not me. And again, there's so much about identity and self that you can see in this movie.
Yeah, David Kallett, in his essay on this, in his book, which if you don't have that, Robert, you need to pick that up. David Kallett's book on the Godzilla. It was
a huge source for my
and he talked about he said it's like Godzilla versus Gigan, where there's a lot of misunderstanding in this. I'm trying to remember exactly how he phrased it. He said it was more prominent in Godzilla versus Gigan, but again, you have all of these characters who think their perceptions are inaccurate. You know, They think
Oh.
the aliens are human. Actually, they're apes. They think, oh, Godzilla is attacking us. No, it's Mechagodzilla in disguise. You know, these two guys are tailing us, and they're probably bad guys. No, they're Interpol agents. You know.
I remember the thing he points to comparing the movies is the corn on the cob gun in Gigan.
Yeah, the corncob hippie.
Well, the gun specifically, the incident with the gun that Goro thinks that his corn cob is a gun.
Is a gun, yes.
And the little confusion when the one archaeologist has been flirting with this woman on the plane the whole time, and they're both going to see his uncle.
Mm-hmm.
But she thinks he's just stalking her because she doesn't know the professor's his uncle that she's going to meet. And I remember, like, in his essay, he compares those two scenes specifically because I think they happen at roughly the same point in the story. And I point out that what we really have is two families in the human characters in this, because the uncle is the professor and his nephew and his assistant, and then you have the former student, and I think her brother is a character. I can't. They're all tied. They're all tied together in some way. You really have what there is two families that are linking to make this stronger, which again ties into Okinawa and Japan.
Oh yeah, which I will definitely be getting into.
And then you have the Azumi royal family of Okinawa and how they're kind of represented in this with King Caesar, and there's so many layers of identity and representation in this film.
Oh yeah. I was just thinking you can definitely tell kind of like the age of a Godzilla fan depending on how they say the name of the Okinawan kaiju in this. You're definitely doing the dub version, King Caesar, because that's how she would say it. The monster's official name is, in English anyway, is Caesar, King Caesar, but it's all mispronunciations of Shisha.
Shisha. Yeah,
like as they say, King Shisha, but it's to the dubbers, it sounded like Caesar, which then got permutated into Caesar, and then Toho being Toho, just to like trademark.
Yep. Well, and I kind of wonder, because this is another one of the Hong Kong dubs with a lot of expats where you get Godzilla. Godzilla shouldn't be fighting his friend Anguirus.
Anguinus.
The Anguinus.
which sounds like an unfortunate euphemism.
Here comes the Anguinus.
Only a couple of people listening to this are going to get that joke, and their names are Elijah and Michael.
But I wonder how much of that is because you have the British expats doing the dub, and
it wouldn't surprise me
because they're Godzilla is Godzilla, and in one extremely big brain moment in Godzilla vs. Gigan, we have the head of the military saying, well, we could try and trust Godzilla.
Yes. So I hear that now, and I'm just like, wait, is that his sister?
Godzilla. There's one of those memes, the big brain memes, where the first one is the dull one is Gojira.
Yeah.
And then the lighting up one is Godzilla.
Uh-huh.
And then the big brain one is Godzilla. And then the at one with the universe is Godzilla.
Oh, that is brilliant.
Oh man. And I love the dubs, and I hate that so many of them are effectively lost media now. That's part of why I started collecting the VHS tapes.
Yeah, I've been grabbing a few of those for the Film Vault as well. Thankfully, this is one of the ones that Criterion was able to preserve. You can watch it.
Yes.
Watch it on Criterion with the dub. Now, the English title sequence is gone from that one. So if you have, if you want to see those, you got to stick with the previous releases. I think even the Sony DVD, if I remember correct, I think the Sony DVD.
The Sony DVD has the English international.
Yeah. So if you want to hold on to those, you need to get them. But
which I do. I have all the Godzilla movies on VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray where they've been released on Blu-ray.
Mm-hmm.
If they were released on that format of those 3 formats, I have them.
Yeah.
Because I have to.
Yeah, you have to. It almost feels necessary now because it seems like even Toho themselves seem to kind of want to bury the dubs at this point. There was an announcement made about the
Biollante
about a Biollante Blu-ray, and it doesn't look like it includes the dub. So
I don't think it does,
which is disappointing. Although I've heard rumors that the previous Blu-ray and DVD put out by their names are Echo Bridge, that apparently they had to go find the dub themselves and rip it from a laser disc.
Yes.
So, even then, Toho was kind of trying to get away with it, even though the bizarre thing about those is that those are the dubs they themselves commissioned.
Yeah.
That's what's weird. It's not like they're trying to bury the AIP dubs or whatever, which were done by a third party. Weirdly enough, I think those are the superior dubs. Those I could sort of understand, but the ones that they asked for themselves.
Well, and I think part of that is just how much international film distribution has changed. Now, subtitles is seen as the default and respectful thing. Whereas, because of how much work it took to put into a dub, that was considered the respectful thing for a long time.
Right. But anyway, let's start diving into this. So, we've kind of been getting into the, the real meat of the analysis here. But since I don't always get a chance to, to go over the cast and crew for these movies, I do want to bring that up because for this one, it's particularly important. So our director is once again Jun Fukuda. This is his final Godzilla film. And he has been quoted as saying he hates them all, even though we're like, please don't, because we love them.
5th and final for him. I honestly think he's too good of a director for even the 2 that I think are objectively bad that I greatly enjoy, but that'd be Gigan and Megalon. I think he's too good of a director for those to ever be boring or unwatchable in any way.
For sure. Which I definitely said about Megalon. Megalon is objectively might be the worst made Godzilla movie of the entire lot, at least out of the Japanese movies.
Yeah.
But it's far from the least entertaining. But, go listen to the episode to hear about that. Our screenwriters, I should say, are Hiroyasu Yamamura or Yamura. I think I have it spelled Yamamura elsewhere. And Jun Fukuda as well. So he worked on the script for this. We're going to hear about Yamura some more because this was not he worked on several drafts of this.
Yamaura.
Yamamura. Okay, so it is
Yamaura.
Yamaura. Okay, so I guess I spelled it wrong elsewhere. Yamaura. Our story is by Shinichi Sekizawa and Masami Fukushima, and this was the last Godzilla film that Sekizawa had any involvement with. He famously said when he was asked to work on this one, he said that there are no monsters left. So he was basically done. But then Teruyoshi Nakano, God rest his soul, the special effects director said, hey, I got an idea that'll save us some money and it'll be kind of easy to do. Robot double. Remember Mechanicon? Let's do that, but for Godzilla. And I guess Sekizawa was like, sure, that works. But Sekizawa was just kind of done. For someone who had such a zest for life and loved doing this, he was like, I'm done.
Took a drag of the cigarette. The last check didn't clear. He's not that invested. Yeah, sure, robot.
Yeah, robot. Yeah, we'll do it. I'm starting to understand how my colleague Kimura feels right now. You know, maybe I don't know. So yeah, and then obviously our producers Tomoyuki Tanaka as usual. Our composer is Masaru Sato. This is also his last G film.
I think this is his best score. It's either this one, in my opinion, or Son of Godzilla. I think those are both like top notch musical scores. And I love there are a lot of really subtle calls to Ifukube in this one especially. So I think this might be, as a work, his best Godzilla score.
I think it's
But
certainly his most memorable. Like this is like if you
yeah,
bring up Sato with Godzilla movies, this is the one I think people usually go to because it is incredibly
yeah,
memorable. The Mechagodzilla theme he had in particular
it's
is
terrific.
very upbeat, very energetic, very jazzy. He's this one really solidifies just how different he is from Ofuka.
And it's a really intimidating theme despite being upbeat and jazzy. I listen to this and the score for Sanjuro a lot when I'm
Yeah,
writing.
because he worked with Kurosawa quite a bit.
Kurosawa as
Yeah.
well. And he wound up kind of typifying what Chambara and samurai movie soundtracks would be from then on. Like it was a huge departure when he scored Yojimbo. Then that became what all the other ones were trying to sound like. I think Sato is underappreciated, I think, in the Godzilla community as a composer.
Well, he's in Fukabe's shadow, which doesn't help.
No, but I think his scores are much more diverse. He's a lot less reliant on themes than Ifukube. I listened to his 3 Godzilla scores and his score for Senjuro and Yojimbo all the time. They're exciting. They don't repeat in the way Ifukube does, which that's right. For a long time I chalked that up to this being my first Godzilla movie. But as I've, gotten familiar with all of it, maybe it influenced my taste in music, but there is something special about his scores.
Oh, for sure. And this is my personal favorite of his, in large part because I do think it's incredibly memorable. And that Mechagodzilla theme, as much as I love what Ifukube does for Mechagodzilla musically and Terror, I would still put this one right up there with it.
Oh, yeah.
2 very different approaches to the same character that, despite how different they are, still accomplish the same things.
Mm-hmm.
They are very befitting for the tones of the movies that they are in.
Yes.
Terror is very dark, kind of apocalyptic at points. This one, yeah, we've got, the world is at stake in this one, but it's livelier. It's more fun, so to speak. Yeah. Definitely it's more in line with what was typical of the 70s Godzilla films at this point, where they're trying to emulate television, the tokusatsu TV shows at the time, whereas Terror is trying to harken back to particularly 1954. So, which, I'll unpack that more when I get to Terror. So, yes. And then interestingly, in terms of music, the big pop song that's in this, because that was my observation in the Hedera episode, one of the defining characteristics of most of these 70s Godzilla films is we're getting away from the orchestra and going more toward pop music, because every single 70s Godzilla movie until Terror has a pop song in it. This is the one here, Miyarabi's Prayer, and there was also a promo song apparently called Defeat Mechagodzilla. It was performed by Bell Bella Lynn.
Yeah.
And was written by Jun Fukuda. And it was arranged and composed by Sato. Yes. So that's an interesting combination of things we had there.
Well, I believe Fukuda wrote the lyrics for the Miraba's Prayer as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, for both of them, which is interesting to say the least. And one of the things that, as much well-deserved criticism as the Criterion Blu-ray set has gotten, and I've been among them, heck, I did a live stream about it with Elijah Thomas, comparing that to the masterclass in how to do this with the Aero Gamera set.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have defended the Criterion on was their subtitling for these movies. In particular, they subtitle the songs.
Yes.
When previous releases, it was very hit or miss. And with the song in this one in particular, I have never seen it subtitled before in an official release.
No, and I think it's actually pretty important to the context of the film.
Oh, yeah.
Once you have that, because her prayer is desperate. Like, it is pleading.
Yeah.
In a way that, like, I think I was surprised when I read for the first time.
Yeah. I will say this. It's too bad that all of us can't have a full band start playing when we start praying to our God for help, because that would be kind of nice. I'm just like,
Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying, it didn't bother me when I was younger, but as I got older, I realized, wait, this turns into a musical for about 4 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just,
and it's a long song. It's a long song.
Yeah, you get the whole thing. Like, if you look up the album version of this, they put the whole thing in the movie. It really is a musical for a couple of minutes. It's just funny how that works out.
Yeah.
And then I mentioned before, our director of special effects is Teruyoshi Nakano, who I still think it was a worthy successor to Tsuburaya. He has a very different style from Tsuburaya. And if I remember correctly, Nakano has gone on record as saying that there are, like, of his top 3 movies that he's worked on, that the work that he's most proud of, this is in his top 3.
Yes. It's no secret that Nakano was real good at making stuff blow up.
He was Michael Bay before Michael Bay.
Yeah. Clearly where his heart is making these miniature explosions. And I think he kind of invented the Super Sentai thing of sparks during combat, like when you make contact, because he just loved making explosions so much.
Mm-hmm.
And just the way he finds the places to do this, that it's not like distracting. In this film especially, this is the first time we see a beam conflict.
A beam clash, yes.
Yeah.
Which I never really got to see until I watched this on DVD and I was finally in widescreen, because those VHSs are horribly cropped. So I couldn't tell what was going on. Like, I remember this one very distinctly being an eye-opener, finally seeing it in widescreen. I'm like, man, I miss so much watching this on VHS for years.
I have a lot of criticisms about the overuse of beams in the Heisei movies, the reliance on them because of how stiff the suits were. But I think this one is really effective because it's showing us, in combat with other monsters, this has always kind of been Godzilla's ace in the hole. This is his Spacium beam finisher. Yeah. And that he pulls it out, 1, so early in the fight, and then 2, that it is met head on.
Mm-hmm.
That's something.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels that way. I didn't have that context the first time I saw it as a kid, but I still got that feeling that this is not what happens.
Yes. And I will say this right now. I think I know what specifically he's thinking of when he says this is one of his top 3 favorite movies that he's worked on. It's the fight at the oil refinery, because that is a feat of tokusatsu right there.
Yes, I completely agree. That's one of, I think, the best fights in the franchise overall, because there is, kind of the wrestling hand-to-hand stuff as well as the beam effects. And there's so much going on in that. So many things that had to be controlled.
Yeah, there's I like there's a I like to call a hero shot for Godzilla where he's getting up, and as he's getting up and he's in a fighting stance, there's an explosion behind him that rises with him, almost as if he caused it behind him to get up. It's almost like a Super Sentai thing to a certain extent. As he gets up, and if his appearance that you were talking about when he first appears and he pops out of the out of the ground and out of a building, which Stuart Galbraith in his book, good Lord, man, he was kind of a grumpy weirdo when he was younger. He likened it to a stripper coming out of a cake. Yes, Jet, I agree. It's kind of weird.
He
must have I don't want to psychoanalyze the man based on that, but what?
I have some of his earlier books, and I have some of his later books. The day he got a sense of humor was a great day for the world. You hear his commentaries on the classic media Godzilla discs, and they're just such a world away from like that first compendium book that he wrote, where everything's crap except the ones that are black and white.
Yeah. It was so weird. It's weird how he's gotten less grumpy as he's gotten older. But anyway, as I was saying about this scene, there's all the fire effects in it, which that had to have been a really hot set.
Oh God!
With those rubber suits and we're having to work around all of that stuff. Like that couldn't have been fun. Like it just so much that had to go into it. All the choreographed explosions. It's a big set too, and it's next to water and it's at night, so it looks amazing. The fire burning amongst all of it. It's quite possibly the best scene in the entire movie. And it's weirdly grounded compared to the madness that we get later.
Yeah.
Which is saying something.
It is a very, the stakes in that scene feel enormous. Especially because when Godzilla goes underwater, it's like a fountain of blood behind him.
Yeah. Yeah, this is not the first time blood has appeared in a Godzilla film, at least on Godzilla. But this by far has the most. One of the books I looked at said that, he said that the blood splatter reminded him of a Tarantino movie. I'm guessing he's probably thinking specifically Kill Bill Volume 1, where there's like comedically huge blood splatter in that.
But that fight at the oil refinery, which is also where we get the term Mechagodzilla.
Mm-hmm.
You could even call it a Mechagodzilla. Beautiful. No notes. And then earlier we get space titanium. You mean it's from outer space.
I was going to say that's the big joke now. It's almost a meme. It's like a minor meme in the fandom now. Space titanium. So it's from outer space.
So before Toho shut down my TeePublic store, I had a shirt with all of the alien monsters on it, and underneath it said, "You mean it's from outer space?" I was very proud of that.
That sounds great. Actually, I wish I could have had one of those shirts.
Long gone.
So genius. Yeah, and then this is worth noting, but our first assistant director of special effects who went uncredited was Koichi Kawakita.
Yeah.
Who later went on to direct the special effects after Teruyoshi Nakano. So he was the successor to Nakano. So we went Tsuburaya, Nakano, Kawakita. And Kawakita took over with Biollante.
There was someone in between.
Yeah, he was. Tsuburaya was still credited, but he was the guy who was really doing it as Sadamasa Arakawa, I think was his name.
Arakawa. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he did some good work too, but just the way Nakano just totally put his own stamp on it immediately instead of trying to do a Subaraya impression.
Yeah.
I think that is part of what makes the 70s movies stand out. And the same thing as with Sato's scores and even Riichiro Manabe's scores.
Yes.
Like, just they stand out so much because they're like, okay, I'll acknowledge what's come before musically, but I'm going to do my own thing. Like, Manabe's Godzilla theme is actually an inversion of Ifukube's. Like, it's kind of beautiful that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if it is goofy.
Yeah.
I love that Sato came up with a different theme for Godzilla in each film. And in this one, it is very reminiscent of Ifukube's without just copying it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then our cast, and this is what's interesting about this, was that this film was originally made basically as the 20th to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Godzilla. Yep. So, even though by the time in 1970 the Japanese film industry crashed, the contract system ended, which was interesting because the contract system was long gone in American filmmaking by this point. I think by the 50s, I think it was over with. So the Japanese were, quote unquote, behind on that. So the contract system ended, which is why in most of the 70s movies, you don't have any of the regulars that we saw for the most part during the heyday of the 60s. Well, that does change a little bit here, as you'll find out. But we had Masaki Daimon as Keisuke Shimizu. I have had the privilege of meeting this gentleman. He's a nice guy. And he won the Nippon Award for Best Newcomer this year, in 1974. So he's our star. Then you had Kazuya Aoyama as Masahiko Shimizu, so the brother.
Yes.
And then, this was the big get. This is one of the big callbacks. Akihiko Harada comes back in this as Professor Hideto Miyajima. So here he is returning to the Godzilla series for the anniversary, playing another scientist. And then he plays, he comes back in Terror and plays a complete inversion of Serizawa in the next one. In this one, he's like, almost like Serizawa if he wasn't traumatized.
If he'd lived and gone to therapy after
exactly. If he survived and got some therapy. And then, interestingly, we have Hiroshi Koizumi as Professor Wagura in this. So that's another little callback. Reiko Tajima as Seiko Kanagusuku. So it's the girl in this.
Yeah.
The archaeologist gets confused for a reporter, which is easy to do.
All the time.
Yeah. Hiromi Matsushita as Ikuku Miyajima. Goro Matsumi as Kuranuma. Our guy.
God, one of the greatest, human level antagonists in the Godzilla
franchise. I've got some mixed feelings on him now because he's one of the members of the board.
Well, he's still a good villain.
Yes, yes, he's still a good villain. He's very memorable. He feels like a James Bond villain almost. I mean, this whole movie feels kind of James Bondian, but he feels almost like a Bond villain. And I'm still trying to. He's got the funny birthmark on his face.
The introduction to him, the first words out of his mouth, "Damn Godzilla," and it's just like, it's so
as weird and kind of goofy as the Hong Kong dub for this is. I love the guy who dubs Kuranuma.
He's having so much fun.
This guy. This performance is great, but I kind of love the dub actor with his performance because his voice is kind of raspy and it feels very villainous, almost like a cartoon character.
It's like this,
very slinky, kind of raspy. There's a little bit to it, and some of the dub lines are still embedded in my head. And honestly, I kind of like the dub lines better than the actual subtitle lines. Of them, the one that
Mechagodzilla beat Godzilla to death.
Yes, that's the one I always think of. And then
like that. And I just imagine some programmer who has to input whatever the things that he says are, he's like, there's no program for beat Godzilla to death. Like, I have to input each action, man. Like,
well, here's my crazy fan theory. I think Mechagodzilla is actually operated by an AI that takes instructions from the aliens and then kind of processes those.
that makes as much sense as
because he
anything
clearly
else
has
in
some sort of personality. He kind of comes across as a little bit of a sadist, to be honest, you know. Cause, and he likes breaking people's jaws. Because he tries that several times.
God, and that's such a good move. And then
it's very Kong-esque.
Well, yeah, and then of course in Godzilla versus Kong, when Mechagodzilla is revealed in that Mechagodzilla tries to break Godzilla's jaw,
and shoot a laser down his throat.
Yeah, but it's two callbacks simultaneously, two for the price of one.
Crazy.
And it's just like the fights, all of the fights in this, and then like you said, Mechagodzilla has a personality. He's a jerk.
Yes.
He's a jerk. Like, he goes out of his way to knock down like these newly constructed buildings in like the countryside. It's like, what the hell is this dude here?
Yeah, he just knocks it over. Yeah. Well, and like I said, he clearly is enjoying himself. That's why I say I think he's operated by some sort of an AI that takes instructions. Yeah. That's how you could say, Mechagodzilla, beat Godzilla to death. And then he's like, processing a plan of action. Break jaw and shoot missiles.
Yeah. Just spin your head around as fast as you can.
Actually, I've got to confess this. This is not an original idea to me. I heard this from, I think it was some listener feedback on Kaiju Cast. I don't know, like, how did I not figure this out? This movie is the Terminator before Terminator.
Oh, yeah.
If you think about this for a second, what do we have? Now, he's a robot from space, not from the future, but he is sent to Earth to wipe out humanity with a fake skin as a disguise that gets chipped away by the hero and then eventually destroyed by fire. And then he goes completely ballistic.
Yeah.
And he's shooting at everything. It's like 10 years before the Terminator. He's the freaking Showa Mechagodzilla is the original Terminator. So because of that, in my head, Mechagodzilla's voice is Arnold. Every time I watch a Showa Mechagodzilla movie, it's always he's like, give me your skin, your boots, and your that's not a motorcycle.
Give me your dorsal plates.
Give me your dorsal plates. Hasta la vista, Godzilla.
I just when I was a kid, so I saw this, right, and I immediately wanted to play it, right? And so my sister Aubrey, God bless her, she would be Mechagodzilla so I could be Godzilla. But I had to show her how to do it. So I had to show her how to, keep your hands totally stiff, and you got to go like this when you shoot. Blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. Now, we called Mechagodzilla's beam rainbow boogers. Because it's coming out of his nose, not his mouth.
Jet's very amused by that.
Gosh, it was just so much.
Yeah. Godzilla! Eat rainbow boogers! And then you get the trademark Mechagodzilla move, which, if this was a fighting game, what's his level 3 super called? Fire everything! Because every part of his body is a weapon.
He just picks up his foot and sticks it on a rock, and he's like shooting tow missiles. And
he can project a shield by going full tilt exorcist. He's like, Turns
And,
his
you know,
head backwards and shoots people behind him. God, I imagine Godzilla's just sitting there going, well, this isn't fair.
It's just like, come on. But again, so here's the thing. Sorry, I just did like a little boxer dance.
Yeah, listeners.
Godzilla is unpredictable in a way that a machine cannot be, even one that's driven by an AI.
Yeah, because the alternate title in my head for this is Magneto versus the Terminator.
And so Godzilla's unpredictability, you know, this monstrous virtue, this virtue of monstrousness, rather,
yeah, which we've talked about before in your past appearances.
Yes, is how Godzilla wins by, as the wonderful introduction to the American version of Terror of Mechagodzilla puts it, he calls on heretofore unknown powers.
That's Godzilla's entire existence in the Showa series.
Jeez, and there is kind of like a hand wavy explanation that Godzilla's getting struck by lightning earlier in the movie, and then of course our brilliant bad guy has the perfect line to this happening when Godzilla starts calling Mechagodzilla back out of the sky with his new magnetic powers. And he has the perfect line. So, he's turned himself into a magnetic pole.
In case you didn't know.
And again, 3-year-old Robert goes, of course.
It makes sense. But it's so wild seeing that scene. It's kind of moody. It looks like it might be on Monster Island. I'm not sure. And Godzilla's just like, come to me, lightning. Come to me. Anime power up time.
And it's, you know, and he goes Super Saiyan, you know, like. And then he's even using his hands like to draw him in, like he's reeling him back.
Yeah, and then after he does it, he sits there and he's like, oh, and then you see the energy build up and it starts sparking. He is going Super Saiyan. There's no getting around. He is going Super Saiyan.
And he grabs Mechagodzilla and he finds the part below where his head was turning and rips it out. Like
fatality.
It's oh man.
Wins.
It's like it is still like I still get excited, you know, watching this. This is a story. I was in high school and I had a kind of girlfriend who I was trying to get to watch monster movies with me. She wasn't super into him, which was also good because then that meant we would make out. So because she was bored.
I like your attitude. There's always an upside to this.
So she would be bored and want to make out. But when we were watching this one, I was like, hang on, babe. Godzilla's turning himself into a magnetic pole. Like, everything's got to stop. And just like you see my body language, right? And I'm talking about this fight. That's how I get watching it too. Like I want to be doing that. Like
there's something weirdly primal about it, isn't there?
Yeah. And I get that in a lot of Godzilla movies. And I think that this one in particular, I think it's some of the most like savage animalistic fighting since maybe Godzilla Raids Again.
Probably.
And that we don't really see again until like the Monsterverse. And I love it. I love it so much. Just like these grapples, this like biting and tearing and
and it's seeing your hero struggle to actually pull all of this off.
Well, and we get this other hero moment for Godzilla at the start of the final fight where he's like ascending the hill,
which was supposed to be an homage to 54.
Yeah. which is great. And I have something, I said something about that. Do you mind if I read a bit
No, go
from
for
the
it.
essay? So what I say here is I compare Godzilla to the fairy tale, like in general, the archetype of the fairy tale, and how a lot of my fairy tale context comes from G.K. Chesterton, and he was popularly misquoted by Monster in his own right, Neil Gaiman, as fairy tales are more than true, not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because dragons can be beaten.
C.S. Lewis has a similar line where he says that children should hear fairy stories so that not only do they know about dragons, but they can know about brave knights.
Yes, and that's the actual Chesterton quote is fairy tales do not give the child his first idea of bogey. What fairy tales give the child is his first idea of the possible defeat of bogey. The baby has known the dragon intimately ever since he had an imagination. What the fairy tale provides for him is a St. George to kill the dragon.
Mm-hmm.
So I extend that logic. We see in this that Godzilla, the dragon, can be defeated, and that shows us his vulnerability. The dragon is persecuted for its monstrousness, which makes it a threat to society. Once we realize that not only can monsters be slain, but that many feel they must be slain, it becomes easy to see them as victims of their own size, strength, and a society that rejects them. As Ishido Honda said, monsters are tragic beings. They are born too tall, too strong, too heavy. They are not evil by choice. And I tie that in to some of my experiences, which I brought up a little bit, the kind of context I grew up in. And I say, now, I'm not saying that my formative years were spent fighting off neo-Nazis and hooded Klansmen with pointy sticks. But when you're 3 years old, you don't understand why so-and-so invited everyone except you and a few other dark-skinned kids to their pool party. You don't understand why a parent in the park might tell her daughter not to talk to you on the playground. You don't understand why the daycare teacher called everyone in for cake except for you and the same handful of kids who didn't go to that pool party. But you know it hurts, and you're aware of this prejudice even if you don't have a name for it or know exactly why it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then you watch movies and TV shows. You see Frankenstein's monster trapped in a burning windmill while the townspeople cheer. You see Lawrence Talbot punished with an ancient curse for trying to help someone, and then hunted down like a dog by the same people who knew him as a child. The monsters are destroyed, everyone goes home, and sleeps well, knowing their way of life is safe until the sequel. You run away from the monster, unless you are going to kill it. And then you see Godzilla, monstrous by nature, outcast, cresting the hill, coming to destroy the very thing created to destroy him. And he proved superior to it by the same unruly, monstrous virtues that made him an obstacle to his opponents. You see this and you feel through the language of film, this is the hero. His victory is what we've been hoping for. This is Cinderella, triumphing by turning her faults into virtues. This is Tom Thumb using his size to his advantage. This is St. George killing the dragon because he was born with that intimate, innate knowledge of it. Because he has the potential to be the dragon. Godzilla has been the dragon. But even in his very first appearance, we see that Godzilla is truly a monster and accident only, as much our victim as we are his. This makes his heroic work resonate even more. The temptation to be the monster people see you as is strong, especially in the moment in which you realize that what has just happened to you has been happening your whole life. You see all of these things happening to you. I go into more detail. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, you have a choice that isn't fair to you, but it's yours. Do you become the monster, or do you embrace your true, wild, and unpredictable self? The truth is, we know dragons can be beaten. We know that they are fragile and we can relate to them, especially when we have been beaten through our own lives. Once we can realize that you must take each dragon on a dragon-by-dragon basis, we can know which dragons will help us and which dragons will hurt us. Eventually, we know which dragon we are. And, that's what this... Again, this movie didn't give me those thoughts at 3 years old. And a lot has happened to me in between the day I saw it and now, and even when I wrote that essay. But without this movie, I would not have been on whatever path it is I'm on that led me to think in this way, to be the person I am. This is a core pillar of me. And that's why I have the take I have of it, just because my lived experience gives me a relationship with the 150-foot tall radioactive dinosaur at the heart of this film.
That is right there. That passage in particular is why I wanted you on this episode.
And I'm glad, because I do remember when we were first talking before I submitted that essay to Kaiju Ramen, you were like, I don't know, we already have a couple people asking to be on it. And then when that went to your desk, you texted me like, okay.
Yeah, you're going to be on now because more people need to hear this.
So, yes,
more people need to hear that.
That is what this whole movie is about to me. You know, I'm always going to fight for, you know, looking deeper at an ostensibly stupid movie. Because I'm not like one of those, you know, whole death of the artist people, you know.
Yeah, we're very against death of the author on the Monster Island Film Vault.
Death of the author. I'm sorry, I said artist.
No, it's close enough.
I don't subscribe to that, but I also don't discount at all what we bring. To the art we consume, we inhale. What the authors mean. They can have these thoughts as they're putting it together and not be able to articulate it. But a lot of times that's why we tell stories, to articulate things we can't say plainly. And even if, you know, your boss comes to you and says, hey, I need you to tell a story about two monsters fighting for the 20th anniversary of this other monster movie, you're always going to put something of yourself in there, of how you're feeling. And, you know, I almost think you wonder what Jun Fukuda, in writing this, thought about, I don't want to make these movies. He's, from his perspective, Godzilla, resentful of having to clean up over and over again the mess someone else has created. And Shinichi Sekizawa is Godzilla. He's tired. He's done with this. You know, we bring that to what we create, and then what we create evokes these ideas and emotions in the people who consume it.
Again, this is why I brought you on. And we still got a lot more to talk about. That would be like the perfect way to end this, but we still got stuff to get into. So to get back to our cast list here. So I left off
that was the
Kuronuma. Yeah, I left off of Kuronuma. We went on this wonderful tangent. But next up, we have our two Interpol agents, Shin Kishida as Nambara and Takayasu Tori as Tamura. There was a guy on Kaiju Cast who says, like, I need like a hard-boiled, like, buddy cop TV show with these guys.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And then we had Beru Lin as Princess Nami. Interestingly, she is not Japanese. She's actually Taiwanese. And according to my research, has a short filmography of erotic thrillers.
Okay.
Alrighty then. And then
moving right along.
Yep. Masao Imafuku as the high priest, so her grandfather.
Yes.
And then here's another classic callback. Kenji Sahara. He makes a cameo as the ship captain. He's the one who's like, oh yeah, here's the real statue that you conveniently replaced with a fake somehow. because a plot demanded it. I'm sure that gave you a nice little charge, plot convenience and all. You know, he's powered by plot convenience, didn't you know? Yeah. And now here's our suit actors. This movie is noteworthy because this is the first time that the suit actors actually got credited.
Yes.
So we have Isao Zushi as Godzilla, Kazunari Mori as Mechagodzilla, and Kenichi Kasumi as Anguirus and King Caesar. That guy got double duty.
Yeah. Pretty thankless double duty as well.
Yeah, kind of. Although I am actually an unabashed King Caesar fan. I like King Caesar.
I love him. I love his design. I love his role in the story. He's a really creative kaiju, and I know he's kind of retooled, if you'll pardon the pun, from Majin Tool.
Yeah. Oh wait, Jet, don't interrupt us, okay? No, not that one. Jeez, man, hit the right button. Jeez, how long have you been doing this? Jeez, but yeah, Majin Tool. Yeah, because apparently it has been revealed by Toho that he's actually a construct.
Yes,
which kind of ruined my childhood a little bit because I didn't think he was a construct.
That made a lot of sense to me when I heard it.
It does, but it shattered my perception.
Because I always thought his eyes looked like the reflectors on a tractor.
You're close. You want to know a secret? The prop that they had for the close-up when he wakes up.
It's like stoplights, right?
What?
Was it stoplights?
No, they're taillights from a car.
Yeah. So that's once
I read that, I'm like, I can't unsee it now.
I recognized that as a kid, so I just assumed his eyes were glass. Like, he doesn't have like pupils or anything. And so he also, when you look at that, is an inversion of Mechagodzilla in a way. That he is a constructed monster, but one constructed for protection instead of destruction.
Yeah. So we got some more stuff like that to unpack. So it's interesting you're bringing up all this stuff about, good monsters and identifying with all that, because some of the unmade drafts that they had of this, you're really going to love when I get into this. But this was... finally getting to it an hour later. This was released March 21st, 1974 for the Champion Film Festival. And it's to celebrate the 20th anniversary. And it was released November 16th, 1976 in America as Godzilla versus the Bionic Monster.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't last long. And then it was released on July 14th, 1977 as Godzilla versus the Cosmic Monster, because apparently they got sued. It was Cinema Shares released it. They got sued for using Bionic because this was
of the Universal
heyday
and the Bionic Man.
Yeah, of the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman. They're like, you can't do that. Pretty sure Bionic is a generic term that they just popularized, but whatever.
Well, they threatened to sue, and Cinema Shares was like, "Oh, we don't need that.
Yeah, we don't need that. Yeah,
need that."
Yeah. It wasn't quite as successful as Megalon. Megalon was the most successful Godzilla film that they released, interestingly. But listen to my episode on it, people. The advertising campaign that they did for that movie was absolutely insane. So, but this one was mostly shown at Saturday Kitty matinees.
Yeah.
So,
and as a double feature and sometimes triple feature.
Yeah.
With Megalon and Gigan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now they did edit it down a bit to take out. Weirdly enough, they took out the profanity and the human violence, but left all the monster action.
Well, because that's what we want to see.
Well, yeah, but I'm like, wait, you're going to take out all of the human violence and the human blood, but Godzilla could spray red all over the place and no one cares. Okay. It sold 1.33 million tickets in Japan, which was about 370 million yen. So it was a step up in terms of gross.
Yeah.
Compared to the previous ones. And it grossed about $17.1 million overseas, bringing its grand total to about $20 million by 1980, according to my research. So it was enough to keep the franchise going, but as you'll find out when I do my episode on terror, it wasn't enough to save it. But it should be noted that while all the rest of Toho's franchises died after 1970, Godzilla kept plugging along for another 5 years.
Yeah. And
that tells you something.
Well, and then you look at Godzilla versus Megalon was a huge hit in the States. And that didn't come out over here until I want to say 76. And that gave Godzilla...
It was 76 because they promoted it.
That's right, with the election. Yeah, with the presidential election. And so this came out in 77 here in the States, which is the same year.
Let me double check. I think it was 76 and then 77.
Yeah,
because it got re-released. It got re-released after they retitled it
as Cosmic Monster in 77.
As Cosmic Monster, yeah. Yeah, one source I looked at said it was released in April of 76, but
most sources I've seen say it was released in November or December of 76, and then pulled and brought back out in January.
Yeah, and that's I'm more likely to go with that one. But yeah, like I said, the franchise kept going when all the rest of Toho's had dried up after the crash.
And Toho was greenlighting a lot of American Godzilla merchandise and licensing, especially the Hanna-Barbera cartoon started in 1977. And that ran in various iterations despite only having like 25, 30 episodes.
Yeah, something like that.
That ran for 10 years almost. Like it was 5 years as a Saturday morning cartoon and then in syndication until the mid-90s.
Something like that.
I give a presentation that's a brief history of the Godzilla Showa era. You can hire me to do that for you, by the way, anyone.
He's a librarian.
I present at conventions or whatever. I have a lot.
Come to G-Fest.
They'll all know all of this.
You'd be surprised.
But the ending of that presentation, the last kind of chapter of it, is called Godzilla Goes Away, but Not Really. Because over here, Godzilla really doesn't go away. That gap from 75 to 84 that Japan had, we had it from, well, Mechagodzilla was released in Terror of Mechagodzilla was released in 78. And then we got Godzilla 1985 in that year. But at the same time, we have the Hanna-Barbera cartoon coming out. We have the movies and reruns on TV and still at drive-ins. The Marvel comic. Which, by the way, my wife, who is already back in Texas, got me the new full-color Marvel comic release. But all through this period, we are getting a steady diet of Godzilla in the U.S. We barely have, I think it's 2 years, not even 2 full years, where there was not something Godzilla related being released newly before Godzilla 1985.
Yeah. So, to get back to this.
Sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. So, this went through a couple of iterations from what I was reading. The first official draft was called Monsters Converge on Okinawa Showdown in Cape Zanpa. And it had Godzilla, Mothra, and Anguirus fighting an alien-controlled robot called Garogan.
Okay.
And they ended up dropping it because they didn't think the script was all that good. And this was also by Yamaura, by the way. He did all of these.
Yeah.
And also because the Mothra Amago prop was unusable at this point. So it had to be retooled. The next one, according to an article by Bob Eggleton, had Godzilla fighting doubles of himself created by atomic tests by both China and America.
Now that would have been really interesting.
Well, it was dropped because it was viewed as too political.
Yeah.
Although that would have been interesting. But here's the one. Shout out to John LeMay, the most cited man on this podcast.
Yes.
he made me and a lot of other people aware of this one. This is one of my top 3 favorite unmade Godzilla projects that if I could somehow, like I have 3 in mind, I would take them and I would make them. If I was given the resources, I would make them exist. This is one of them. It was called Tokyo SOS, Japan SOS, Godzilla's Suicide Strategy. Please don't demonetize me, YouTube, for saying that.
Godzilla's self-unaliving strategy.
Yeah, there you go. The thing of it is, it might have paved the way for this, or it may have not, because from what I've read in John's book, it might have been written and pitched anytime between 1973 and 1978.
Yeah.
No one knows for sure when it came about. I like to think that this was an early draft of this movie, personally, because there's just too many similarities. So, to get into it really quick, go read John's book for the full rundown.
Which book?
The Big Book of Japanese Giant Monster Movies, The Lost Films, Mutated Edition. That's the one I have.
I wanted to get the full plug-in.
Yeah, there you go. So, it would have featured Gigan, who somehow survived Zone Fighter, because he canonically dies in Zone Fighter.
Yes.
Okay. And an invisible robot monster, I might add, named Kamilagon. The characters, from what I was reading, are kind of similar to the ones from Mothra vs. Godzilla, only they swap the genders. Now it's a lady reporter and a male photographer. But they also have a scientist and a pilot among their ranks. The alien villains in this are supposed to be from a dark nebula, as opposed to, black hole planet number 3. But that's an easy, path to get to black hole.
Yeah. Or dark universe.
Yes. And they don't explain how Guy can survive, but he also has a new power. Now he can make hurricanes.
Good for him.
And there's a whole set piece with him making a hurricane. But here's where it gets interesting. This is the part where I'm like, I need this to exist. And after what we talked about, with your essay, this is right up your alley.
Yes, sir.
Here's the issue. The Kamilagon is invisible, but Godzilla can see him because he's what's called a tetrachromat. He has 4 types of cones in his eyes that allow him to see higher intensity lights. So he can see Kamilagon, humans can't, unless they have equipment. Like I think I read in this summary that John gave, that our main characters are able to see Kamilagon using infrared.
Yes. I recall reading this in the mutated.
Yes. So what ends up happening is Godzilla goes after Kamilagon, and now Japan thinks he's turned on them because they can't see the other monster.
Mm-hmm.
So they shoot him with a missile that has a compound in it that blinds him. So he gets turned into Zatoichi.
Zatoichi.
Yeah, there you go. And then when you get to the end of the movie, all these other shenanigans and all that ensue, that sound kind of similar to what they do in the final movie. And then Godzilla has to fight both Gigan and Kamilagon while blind. And all that's said in this pitch is, it's a pitch or script, whatever. In this draft, all it says is that he uses sound to do it. So I'm like, I need this to be real. Like, we're actually playing up the fact that Godzilla is supposed to be the hero, but now it looks like he's turned on the humans and are like, screw the lizard. He's not on our side anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I need this. And then trying to fight them while blind afterward. I'm like, I need this to be real.
That would have been awesome.
It would have been amazing. But you can kind of see how that leads to what we have in this movie. Instead of it being Godzilla is mistaken as a villain, someone shows up pretending to be him and frames him. You can see the logical progression there. Curiously, Chameleon is also the name of a monster in the Tsuburaya production superhero show Mirror Man, which was also written by the same guy, that episode. And then one of the names of the characters in this draft is Hayato Ichimonji, which is the name of Kamen Rider 2 from the original Kamen Rider.
I'm shaking my head in disbelief. In disbelief, listeners.
Interesting, to say the least. He might, now I'm guessing it could have just been placeholder names, you know, because he's just throwing it out there. It might have been changed later, but that is a little suspicious, to say the least. And it should be noted that Yamaura was a frequent writer on Tsuburaya shows, Ultraman, Mirror Man, Ultra Q, all of them. And he also worked on Ambassador Magma, aka Space
Goldar.
Giants. Yep. The original Goldar. Yeah. And as I pointed out, and it should be noted, this was, I forget who pointed this out. It might have been Khaled. I think it was Khaled. The final draft of this, which shouldn't surprise anybody, given what we've just talked about, is very similar to Johnny Sacco and his flying robot. Khaled even says that Mechagodzilla's design is similar to the titular robot from there, particularly because they both have finger missiles.
Well, I think the accordion folds at the joints are really the...
Yeah, that too. And there are similar shots for both robots when they are launched.
Yes.
From their hangar bays. Interesting. Also, Nakano said that Mechagodzilla's movements were inspired by formal walks in kabuki. And both Ryuhei Kitamura, director of Godzilla Final Wars, and Dave Filoni, interestingly, have cited this as their favorite Godzilla movie.
They're both right.
And Kitamura has said King Caesar is his favorite kaiju.
He's not quite right, but he's on the right.
Sadly, this would be Anguirus' last appearance for 30 years.
Until he returned as Anguinus.
Anguinus.
Anguinus, excuse me.
The Anguinus. Yeah. I've always, and I think this is the prevailing theory on Monster Island, that he did not die. He retreated after being severely wounded, and just hunkered down for a little bit to nurse himself back to health, because obviously he helps fight Ghidorah in 1999.
Yeah,
so.
That's always what I had assumed. Like, he's just got to nurse his wounds.
Yeah. And here's something interesting. Because I always joked, it's like, wow, Mechagodzilla's taking his time after he gets launched to go kill King Caesar. He's not in a big hurry. He could fly there, but nope, he's just going to take a stroll. Well, someone actually figured out where he was coming from and how far it was.
Yeah?
Yeah. It says it's either, was it Zampa Masaki or Cape Maida? And the base is at the Gyokusen Caves, which is often called Gyokusen-do, which, by the way, are real cave. They actually filmed this movie in Okinawa, and those caves are real Okinawan caves. They're tourist attractions. So basically, this movie is to Okinawa what Lord of the Rings is to New Zealand. It's like, hey, come visit Okinawa. Look how cool Okinawa is. Hey, guys, did you know how cool Okinawa is? Oh, yeah, Okinawa is so cool, which we'll get into why they're doing that here in a moment. But anyway, the distance between those two locations is 45 kilometers. That
is quite a ways.
And he apparently walks it in like 5 minutes because he has to give Nami just enough time to sing her song.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. Not in a hurry, but apparently he is in a hurry.
So he's only flying when the camera's not on him.
I guess. And then he's like, "Oh, camera's on me."
Doing a Michael Myers, just like guy's got to be running when the camera's there.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's weird. And Nakano said that for the special effects, he wanted to show that Godzilla movies could be as exciting and boisterous as as popular American movies.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they're big, colorful explosions. And don't know how to feel about this, but he thought that the previous approach to Godzilla movies were juvenile, and he was very happy to portray Godzilla as menacing again, even if it was Mechagodzilla in disguise.
Yeah, you get that sense. They're really enjoying the destruction scenes as they're making them. Like,
Yep.
you can
Oh, yeah,
feel-
yeah. Gyokusen Cave. That's a real cave in Okinawa. Yeah, I mentioned that. So that is the actual cave in Okinawa. Interestingly, the Mechagodzilla suit's the only Showa era kaiju suit that has survived. It's on display in a museum, although they kind of cheat. It's cobbled together from both this
Between
suit and the terror
and,
suit.
yeah, like I think one of the arms has MG2 on it, and the other one
Yeah.
just has MG.
Yeah. Here's a bizarre little fact for you. This was the first Japanese Godzilla film released in Hungary in 1989.
Huh.
It was so reviled that no other Japanese Godzilla films were released there until -1. And apparently, up until that time, most Hungarians thought of Godzilla 98 as the only true Godzilla movie.
Oh boy.
You poor Hungarians. I'm so sorry.
Wow.
Oh,
That's-
interestingly, the King Caesar suit was put on display at Expo 75, which was held in Okinawa, and they actually name dropped the expo in the movie.
Yes.
Not by name, but they said, "Oh yeah, I'm here to get stuff to put on display at the expo."
Yeah. Which in 71, the expo was a huge part of the inspiration for Hedorah and Gamera versus Jagger.
Yep.
It actually takes place at the
Yep.
expo.
Yep. Go back and listen to my episodes on those people if you want to learn more about those. All right, so get into some interesting, kind of, analyses that I found there. No, you know what? I'm going to save this for later because this ties into the historical stuff. But I do want to mention, really quick, these notes that I have to put this into context. So this takes place on Okinawa, which is very interesting. Like I said, once you know what was going on at the time. So for those who don't know, Okinawa is the largest of the Ryukyu Islands that are about 70 miles long. They're about 7 miles wide on average, and they're 400 miles south of Japan and 400 miles off the coast of China and 300 miles north of Taiwan. The capital is Naha, okay, and has a population of 1.3 million people. The other thing that's noteworthy about this is that there are a ton of American military bases on it. About 18% of the island and 75% of the United States Japan forces are in the Okinawa prefecture. That's a lot, obviously. But that's because as I'll get to in a moment, the Americans maintained control of Okinawa after the war. So they left the rest of the country, in terms of occupation, but they stayed on Okinawa until the early 70s, which I'll get into. So Okinawa became part of the Ryukyuan kingdom. So the Ryukyu Islands were their own separate kingdom from mainland Japan. All right. So they were added to Okinawa was added to it in 1429 after Shohashi unified the islands, and he continued the long-standing tradition of trading with China and other neighboring nations. And then around 1590, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who was a Japanese feudal lord called a daimyo, you're going to hear that a lot, a daimyo, requested the Ryukyu kingdom help him conquer Korea, after which he planned to move on to China. But because they were a tributary state of the Ming dynasty in China, the Ryukyu kingdom refused. Hideyoshi was later overthrown by the Tokugawa shogunate, who in 1609 authorized the Shimazu family, who were the rulers of the Satsuma domain, which is now modern-day Kagoshima prefecture, to conquer the Ryukyus. The islands were occupied with minimal resistance. The Ryukyuan king was captured and held prisoner for 2 years in the Satsuma domain of Edo, which is now Tokyo. When he was returned, the Ryukyuan kingdom maintained some autonomy, since complete annexation would cause problems with China at the time. And then by serving as a tributary state for both China and Japan, the island served as a loophole for the two countries to trade with each other. But it starts getting crazier. Basically, at this point, Okinawa ends up having a long, unfortunate tradition of being occupied by foreigners.
Yep.
So, 1872, 4 years after the Meiji Restoration, Japan annexed the island, much to the chagrin of the Qing dynasty in China. And then 7 years later, the Okinawa prefecture was established, and the Ryukyuan monarchy in Shuri Castle in Naha was abolished. The deposed King Shotai forcibly relocated to Tokyo and made marquis in the Meiji system of peerage. Hostility in the Ryukyus toward the mainland increased in the decades following the annexation, as Japan systematically attempted to eliminate Ryukyuan religion, language, and cultural practices. Public education was introduced by Japan, and the schools, this is so crazy, and the schools only permitted standard Japanese to be spoken. Any students who spoke their own language, as was the case for most Ryukyuans, were shamed by wearing dialect cards, which are these plaques that mark them as dialect speakers, around their necks. A student who spoke Okinawan would wear it until another student spoke Okinawan, at which point it was passed on, and whichever student was wearing it at the end of the day would be punished by the teacher. This was done because the Meiji government sought to create a standard Japanese speech by suppressing the many distinct dialects of Japanese in favor of the Tokyo dialect used by the upper class in the Yamanote area of the city. The Ministry of Education, among other institutes, implemented many policies to reduce or suppress regional differences. I would actually expand off of that, and I would think, because I think we see this animosity toward the mainland in the grandfather.
Yes.
Nami's grandfather, because he actually says, I hope Godzilla destroys the mainland for us, when he's just hearing that, he's hearing Godzilla do it, and it's Mechagodzilla in disguise. He even prays that it happens.
For the destruction of the Japanese mainland.
Yeah, which tells me, especially given his age, although funny enough, that actor was only 50 years old in that movie, but they made him look like, was it Pai Mei from like Hong Kong martial arts movies? But I'm guessing he's probably old enough to have been one of those kids.
Yeah.
In the school who had to wear the dialect cards.
Well, I've always thought about Okinawa in two contexts: of the struggle of the Irish people for autonomy and of how the U.S. treats Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you put those two together, you get kind of a basic understanding of what's going on for most people, but just that kind of also oversimplifies and robs the unique struggles of the Okinawan people.
Yeah. But I mean, even what my presentation right now is nowhere close to exhaustive.
Yeah.
Now, the next major event that happens in the history of the island is the Battle of Okinawa, which was nicknamed the Typhoon of Steel in World War II, which lasted from April 1st to June 22nd, 1945. It was the war's largest amphibious assault in the Pacific, and it was one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific theater, with 160,000 casualties on both sides.
Jeez.
Including 75,682 Allied and 84,166 to 117,000 plus Japanese, drafted Okinawans among them. And nearly half of the 300,000 native Okinawan population were killed, committed suicide, or went missing during the battle. Now, the Battle of Okinawa is a whole to-do unto itself, but that's the very minimal basics right there to understand what was going on. But that is why there are military bases there. Because it was after the war, it was controlled by the U.S. military.
Yeah.
And while the Treaty of San Francisco officially ended hostilities in 1952, the U.S. retained Okinawa and continued to establish bases, like I said. This created friction between the Americans and the Okinawans because the soldiers were exempt from domestic jurisdiction in light of Okinawa being an occupied territory.
Yeah.
The U.S. dollar was the official currency, and cars drove on the right side as opposed to the left, like in Japan. So again, Okinawa is just for like 500 years at this point is just
occupied.
Has a long tradition. Well, 300 years is probably more accurate. It's just a long history of being occupied by foreigners. First, it was the Japan, kind of the Chinese, then the mainland Japan, then the Americans. So now we get to 1971, just a few short years before this movie.
Yeah.
June 17th, 1971, the United States and Japan signed the Okinawa Reversion Agreement, in which the U.S. relinquished all holdings given to them by Article 3 of the Treaty of San Francisco, which included Okinawa and many other islands. In exchange for returning the islands, the United States could maintain its military because of Okinawa's strategic importance. Keep in mind, the Cold War is still very much going on at this point, and the United States needs an ally in this region of the world, and Japan was very much that ally. And, because there's still ties between them because of their treaty. The islands would be subject to any future agreements between the countries. The U.S. would repair damaged lands they seized. Japan would recognize the American administrator's authority and not hold them criminally responsible for actions they took as administrators. Japan also agreed to pay the U.S. $320 million over 5 years. The goal was to transfer sovereignty while ensuring a democratic government and keeping Japan from becoming an enemy of peace. Negotiations for this started in 1968. Japan wanted the reversion by 1972. The biggest issue being contested was the presence of nuclear weapons. The United States wanted to stockpile nukes in Okinawa as a deterrent for North Korea invading South Korea. This will actually factor into the movie, believe it or not.
Okay.
I will get to that. In the end, the islands reverted to Japan, but the United States could stockpile nuclear weapons on Okinawa in case of an emergency. But this asks the question, what constitutes an emergency worthy of nukes? Because Japan doesn't want nukes on their country.
Yeah.
They have the 3 non-nuclear principles, and one of them is that they're not even going to host these things. Okay? It's not law, they're principles. So they're like, we don't want them. If you've seen Return of Godzilla, they actually get invoked in the Return of Godzilla.
Yes.
Because both the Soviets and the Americans like, we need to nuke the lizard. And they're like, no, you're not. We say no. Yeah, we say no. Please don't. All right. So China contested all these negotiations because they thought old maritime logs entitled them to the islands. These were judged to be insufficient. The islands fell under Japanese control May 15th, 1972. So less than 2 years before this movie came out, Okinawa was given back officially to Japan. There was also the Koza riot, December 20th, 1970, where 5,000 Okinawans fought 700 American MPs or military police in anger over 25 years of occupation. 60 Americans were injured, 80 cars burned, and several buildings at the Kodina, I think is how you say it, air base damaged or destroyed. So this whole process did not go off without a hitch.
Mm-hmm.
American soldiers have reported that reversion has created many challenges over the years, as you would expect. As part of the 40th anniversary of the reversion, Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda visited Okinawa, where he said that he supported their independent efforts to improve the prefecture and acknowledged the military bases the burdens, I should say, placed on them, and that they would try to reduce that burden. He spoke very highly of Okinawa and its people. Again, not unlike what we see in this movie, which I will get to. Okinawans continue to seek the removal of the bases and equal standing with mainland Japanese citizens. They prefer using government investment over American military to improve their prefecture. So, unlike mainland Japan, they've got a fair amount of animosity toward the Americans, but it goes back to the fact that they're just sick of foreigners coming in and telling them what to do.
Who wouldn't be?
Yeah. I mean, they used to be their own kingdom, like I said.
Yeah.
So, and now the reason I bring up the thing about the nukes and how it factors into this movie, Jason Barr wrote a book called The Kaiju Film. He actually has another book out now related to kaiju that I need to pick up. I forget what it's called, but I just discovered that within the last 2 years, he's published another one. And one argument that he made that I don't entirely agree with, because I think he's going a little far with it. And he argues that the aliens at least in the Showa movies, you didn't really apply this take to the later movies or even to non-Godzilla Toho tokusatsu or just tokusatsu in general. But he argues that the aliens in these movies are thinly veiled stand-ins for Americans, because these are alien invaders, and the only country who has ever successfully invaded Japan, because they're an island nation, is America. So the Zillions, not so much the Keloks. He didn't really talk as much about the Keloks in this book, but the Zillions, particularly, he cited as an example of this, which go back and listen to my episode on that, but that really doesn't make sense in that movie, given that one of the major stars in the movie is American, whose best friend is a Japanese man, and he's in love with, she's technically an alien, but it's a Japanese actress. Like, it really falls apart really fast when you stop and think about it.
One of the points I found weaker in that book.
Yeah. So anyway, bring all that up. You want to hear me talk about that in the previous episodes, go listen to those episodes. He argues that it's even more damning in this movie. First off, I don't know how to feel about, well, actually, if that's true, I feel kind of insulted as an American being told that I'm an ape, which the reason why they did that, by the way, the ape aliens, is because Planet of the Apes was
extremely popular.
Huge deal, was hugely popular in Japan. And that whole first cycle of movies had finished just before this came out. And there were ape villains in Spectre Man. Shout out to my friend Neil Reeby. He's a huge fan of Spectre Man. In fact, one of the actors in this also played one of the ape aliens in Spectre Man. It's funny. I think I have that here in this note. And Super Raya Productions made a show about that dealt with apes, which became the movie Time of the Apes. Yeah, it was a compilation movie. So I would argue, okay, the fact that they're apes is because apes were Planet of the Apes and all that. It was popular at the time. So I can write that off. But, here's the actor. It's Takanobu Toya, who's in both this and Spectre Man as an ape. He's the one that gets caught by Numbara in the cave. He's the one who's he shoots him in the arm, and his arm reverts, and he's like, give him the password, and all that. Shows him where the base is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the reason why he says this is he cites the U.S. occupation of Okinawa after the war, and because they secretly, for short periods, harbored nukes there in the 60s, I think is when it happened. And that they frequently used the island as a bargaining chip during the Cold War. They would also clear-cut forests and allowed communal lands to become commercial, which went against local beliefs and customs. So he argues Mechagodzilla can be seen as an extension of the US's power. Basically, Mechagodzilla is one of those nukes in his interpretation. And the team up between King Caesar and Godzilla can be seen as indicative of Japan and Okinawa because they are the same but different.
Mm-hmm.
But King Caesar is clearly not interested in, he's clearly only interested in protecting Okinawa. He's not interested in protecting the rest of the world or even the rest of Japan. He's there to protect Okinawa.
Yeah.
I think that's a little bit of a I think it's a short-sighted take, much like with the Zillions, because I think that falls apart there. The way I look at it is that this is not a one-to-one comparison. Now, is it informed by that? Yes.
Absolutely.
But I think people take it too far to say that, the apes are clearly supposed to be Americans and Mechagodzilla is one of the nukes that they were secretly harboring on the island and blah, blah, blah. I think you're going a little far with it because the attitude of these filmmakers was not anti-American.
No. And if you read the book Godzilla on My Mind by Bill Susui?
No, that's been on my list for a long time. I need to get to it.
He argues in that book, in parts of that book, that in the Showa series, Godzilla is often an analogy for Japan's relationship with the U.S., which I think is the more generally accepted reading.
Mm-hmm.
So in the case of the 70s, it was generally a popular... Because again, U.S. hadn't been in mainland Japan for 20-odd years.
It was almost 30 at this point.
Yeah, so people on the mainland were like, cool.
Yeah. Well, and one of the main motivations for making this movie, and this is the more positive take on what he's talking about, is they're like, hey, we just got Okinawa back. We have a history. Let's see if we could smooth that over a little bit. Let's make a Godzilla movie for Okinawa. We'll set it in Okinawa. We'll film in Okinawa. We'll show off their culture and and their and all of this stuff. We'll show off that part of the country, and we'll even make a monster for them. And I'll get into that here in a second.
Yeah.
That is very distinctly Okinawan. And then we have Godzilla, who is Japan's monster, and then they team up to fight an invader together. So it's like they're saying like, hey, mea culpa, hey, you're with us now. We like you.
We're all buddies.
Here's our monsters. Our monsters are going to team up to fight a common enemy. I love that. I love that idea.
That's very nice.
I love that idea so much more. Yes, Mechagodzilla is the foreign invader, but now they're working together. And sure, yeah, King Caesar's only worried about Okinawa. That's all right. That's indicative of, Okinawan culture and the fact that Godzilla is more or less defending Japan and by extension, the rest of the world. That reflects Japan's attitude as a culture at the time, the mainland Japan's attitude, because they were very interested in rejoining, especially, at this point it was like a 10-year project. They were really reestablishing themselves in the international community. So, they're thinking bigger and, Caesar's thinking about the local there. So, you could interpret Caesar as being kind of an elitist monster. Ooh, you got to find a princess, to, a priestess, to talk to him. And he's only going to worry about the island. And, you could interpret it that way, maybe, but, I'm not bothered by it. And I love the idea that it's an olive branch being offered by the mainland to Okinawa, saying like, hey, we can be friends now.
Yeah. My bad. Here's I don't know. I made you this cheesecake.
Yeah, I made you this cheesecake. And again, they're going to be like, we're going to talk up your country. We're going to be like, look how cool this place is. Look at these caves. And, like they're really showcasing the, that part of the country, like they're going, it's almost comical how much they go out of their way to talk up Okinawa.
Well, and they're going back and forth, like, and you can get there by a plane, you can get there by a boat. You know, you could have a nice little vacation cruise on your way to Okinawa.
Yeah. Visit beautiful Okinawa. Like, seriously, it's like I said, it's almost like Lord of the Rings for New Zealand.
Yeah.
So, and a big part of that is I argue, you see several examples, obviously kind of, filtered through kind of a fantasy here, examples of Okinawan culture. In this, we mentioned the old man and his attitude toward the mainland, praying for Godzilla to wreck it. Well, let's talk about his granddaughter here. The Azumi princess, so to speak. By the way, come on, guys. She's prophesying that monsters are going to attack Japan. Lady, how sheltered have you been on Okinawa? Okay, this is Japan. Monsters attacking happens every other week. Okay, this is like somebody in a DC movie prophesying that Batman is going to show up. Okay,
look, they just rejoined.
It's just so funny, and they're using it's Ghidorah.
Yeah, in the stock footage.
It's in stock footage. It's just kind of funny. I realize it was probably a budget thing, but still, and then her prophecy's kind of weird and doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, and it gets fulfilled anyway, and they don't really explain how any of this works, because I'm a student of biblical prophecy, so when I was younger and I didn't quite fully understand things, I'm like, Red Moon, oh no, Book of Revelation, and it freaked me out actually a little bit when I was younger. So, and then there's like, oh, the sun rises in the west. Oh, it's a mirage. How does that work? Okay, the big black mountain, the cloud in the sky, I can work with that. That's fine.
A good one.
That's fine. But the moon, the red
west.
Moon and the sun in the rising in the west, I'm like, I don't. Okay, it's whatever on that, but okay. I can't take full credit for this. Danny DeManna of the Godzilla Novelization Project also has this theory. He thinks that the Azumi royal family is descended from Venusians or Martians, depending on if you like the dub or not, because they're precogs.
Yeah.
And that
would make internal sense.
Yeah, it would. So we get to see some Ryukyuan religion, I would argue, in this. In a nutshell, Ryukyuan religion is characterized by ancestor worship and relationship with the supernatural world, which includes kami, which I've talked about kami before, household gods, and sprite-like creatures called Kiji Muna. I hope I said that correctly. Sure, you can tell Jimmy to write about it in a blog. I guess he still does those. It's similar to Shintoism, but was also influenced by Polynesian religions, Chinese religion, and Buddhism. Now, so you kind of get an impression of that, but here's where I think we really start to see it. One ancient core belief is onarigami, which says that spiritual power is the domain of women and that women are spiritually superior to men. People with exceptional spiritual power are called kaminchu, and the vast majority of them are women. They usually come from families with long lines of kaminchu and are the firstborn sons or daughters. They act as priests, as priestesses who can sense, communicate with, and direct the power of kami. There are two main subgroups of kaminchu: the Noro, who are the chief priestesses for communities believed to embody kami and seek their favor, and they serve as government officials, and the Yuta, who are mediums and shamanesses who communicate with kami but don't embody them. My argument is that Nami is a kaminchu. She fits the description, especially since she's having apocalyptic visions about King Ghidorah.
Yeah.
Well, and awakens King Caesar by singing. Now, I think I err on saying that she's probably a Noro as opposed to, what was the other one? Let me check that. A Utah, but I could be wrong on that. I do believe she is at the very least a Kaminchu, especially since she's supposed to be part of a royal family.
Yeah, that makes sense in the context.
Yeah. So the film is actually showcasing a key part of their culture, their religion, their spirituality, which is really kind of fascinating. We don't typically see that all that often in these movies. Even, when the movies are set in the mainland, you get hints of Shintoism, hints of Buddhism usually, but not like full bore. Here you go. So again, really showcasing the island here.
Yeah, it's I think it's also so integral. It is the inciting incident,
Mm-hmm. And it becomes kind of the blueprint for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Like the whole point is that she makes this prophecy and we're following the prophecy for the rest of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's a Shisa statue, which I need to get to the Shisa. That's the other key part of this. So King Caesar, inspired by the Shisa, because that's his name in Japanese. It's, it's King Shisa, which came out sounding funny to the dubbers. So yes, Shisa, named after those statues. Now, what are Shisa? Shisa are lion dog statues that are used as decorations in Okinawan architecture, and you see them in the opening credits. You'll see them in some of the shots, throughout the movie.
The statue that is the key to unlocking.
The MacGuffin is a Shisa statue.
Yeah,
which Danny DeManna has made one of those, and I'm kind of jealous. I also had an opportunity at a convention to buy one. An actual Shisa statue was it was only 6 inches tall, but it looked weirdly similar to the one from this movie, and I didn't buy it, and I've kind of regretted it. If I could get a Shisa statue, I would totally buy it. So they're similar to the Komainu, or lion dogs, which are used to guard the inner shrines of Shinto shrines in mainland Japan. Both are derived from the guardian lion statue seen in Chinese architecture. I think I've talked about that before in a previous episode, or at least something similar. I think it was when I did The Lake, which takes place in Taiwan. Excuse me, not Taiwan, Thailand. Shisa are essentially gargoyles, to use a Western equivalent, meant to either keep goodness in, usually signified by a closed mouth, or to ward off evil spirits, signified by an open mouth. Although I've also heard that in reverse, where they're somehow the mouth open is allowing goodness in, and the mouth closed is keeping evil spirits out. So it depends on how you want to interpret it. It's no surprise then that the Izumi would have a giant lion dog as their protector, because he's a Shisa. Now, there's an Okinawan legend that, this is conjecture on my part, but I like to think that this legend influenced this movie. Interestingly, I wrote a short story that was published by Wild Hunt Press in Attack of the Kaiju Volume 2 that more or less adapted this story. But there's an Okinawan legend that says a king used a Shisa necklace against a dragon that was terrorizing a village. The king, as instructed by a Noro priestess, met the dragon on a beach, held the Shisa high, and the Shisa statue roared so loud it shook everything, including the dragon. And a huge boulder fell on the dragon's tail, and it eventually died. Doesn't that sound a little bit familiar here?
Yeah, from the royal person.
Yeah. With the end of this movie, it's on a beach. We're summoning a Shisa who has to go fight a dragon. It's a robot dragon, but it's a dragon that is terrorizing the area. I'm just saying, and it goes back to what you were talking about in your essay, with talking about how Godzilla, is not only is the dragon, but he's also Saint George, and how
Yes.
Chesterton talked about how fairy tales let children know that yes, dragons are real, but dragons can be beaten.
Yes.
It all comes back.
Beautiful.
It is
Beautiful.
It really is beautiful. It really, really is. So there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of stuff in this that I think people underestimate this movie. I do. It's not like Godzilla versus Gigan, where Godzilla versus Gigan was kind of, I don't want to say reviled, but disliked for a while. I still think that one's really grossly underestimated, even though I think there's just as much interesting stuff here as there is in Gigan. But because this one has generally been more liked than Gigan, I would say Gigan's more underestimated, but this one's underestimated too. Because like I said, once I heard about this, I can't watch this movie the same way anymore.
Yeah, and it's just, again, for me, this was my entryway, and so everything that I see in it with each time I rewatch it, I've watched this movie so many times, and every time I take something new away. And now with more, like, I knew kind of the basics of what happened with Okinawa, but so much of this extra context and the religion and stuff, I'm going to find 100 more new things.
Oh yeah.
So it's just, it's a mine full of diamonds for those who will take the time to dig.
Oh yeah, for sure. All right, I'm going to share a couple more fun little notes here, and then we can start wrapping things up as usual. I over prepare for my podcast. If you want to see all of my research notes, listeners, join MIFE Max on Patreon, because that's where I will be sharing all of the notes, so you can see everything I didn't get to. There's always leftover notes, always. But we'll talk a little bit more about Patreon once we start wrapping things up here. But some fun facts. Do you remember on the Sony DVD, there is a line where I think the subtitler just gave up? Because unfortunately, the Sony DVD is basically dub titles.
Yes.
Which I hate dub titles with a passion. Thankfully, Criterion didn't do that. But did you notice that there was a point where somehow this got past QC? I don't know why, but the subtitler just gave up. Do you remember? You know what I'm talking about?
No, because I've either watched it on Blu-ray or VHS for the past 5 years.
Oh, dude! If you go back, there's a screenshot of it on the Toho Kingdom review of that disc, because they're like, "What the heck is this?" Or just stick it in when you get back to Texas and watch it. It is the funniest thing. But it's in the scene where the professor is talking with the young guy. I think it might even be the same scene. No, it's the scene where he's introducing Chekhov's magic pipe, because we use it later to disrupt the alien tech later, because of course it works like that. I made a powerful pipe that, snap it in half, it can disrupt technology.
This is kind of cool. Why would you do that?
Yeah, why would you do that? Anyway, because we, at least they pay it off. Even though the bad guys are idiots and miss obvious things, like an Interpol agent only raising one hand while his other hand goes behind and grabs a gun to shoot them. And then they have him handcuffed and they don't see him. That one it's easier for me to believe, where he's doing stuff behind his hands and all that. But whatever on that. Protonuma needs to hire better help. But anyway, they're talking about it. So he's explaining a metal. And it's like some ridiculous sounding metal. If you hear it, you can hear it in Japanese, but the subtitles, when it gets to the name of this metal, the subtitle just put 3 question marks.
I just pulled it up on Toho Kingdom, and it's an A. The bull's medal includes 3 question marks.
I was just like, what? Was there some intern at Sony who was
I'll
really good at hearing things and transcribing it, and he gets to that, it's like, I don't know, and he just puts 3 question marks,
I'll
and
I'll
they
come back
let
to
it
that.
pass,
I'll come back to that.
and he doesn't? What happened there? That is so weird. So credit to Criterion, they bothered to actually get it in there.
Now I'm gonna have to go back to that scene on the
Yeah, if you want to know, it is the metal in question is Estanupkurin. Estanupkurin.
Well, as you see, it's easier
Astanopkaron.
I think a question mark is just as valid as spelling.
It's just so weirdly unprofessional and weird. I don't understand. It's so bizarre. But yeah, like I said, Criteria. That was one of the first things I did is I stuck that disc into a player, because actually like doing Godzilla Redux has basically been my journey through the Criterion Blu-ray set.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things I did when I first bought the thing is I stuck it into the player. I'm like, did they fix this? And I was like, oh, yay, they did. But a question mark. One of the weirdest things, I still can't believe that got past QC. It's just, they let that slide. that intern is either a comic genius or lazy. I don't know.
You know, I bet it is. They were like, I guess it's fine.
Yeah,
like,
I guess
I'll come back to that. That's what I think it was. Like, he's like, just put this placeholder in and then keep going through adding the subtitles, and then his shift ends and he never went back to it. And then someone else takes over and they finish it and it goes to print, and he's like, job well done.
Yeah, there you go. I guess. Yeah. Now, I want to make sure I pay this off. We mentioned that there's a lot of characters in this. It's very much an ensemble. Some people would say the characters are not that great and they don't really connect with the audience. I don't think they're all that terrible, to be honest. But I liken this to Rodan. Rodan kind of has a similar issue, has a lot of characters. The plot isn't as dense as Rodan was, though.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got a lot of moving parts. So, you can follow the characters, you can follow the moving parts pretty well. So I understand the criticism, but I'm not bothered by it all that much. Although I will admit, these are not the most memorable characters, I would say, in a 70s Godzilla movie. Like, yeah. I remember the characters from Hedorah pretty well. I really remember the characters from Gigan pretty well. Yes, I remember your crew really well too, but that's mostly because of MST3K. And obviously Terror of Mechagodzilla is very character driven. So they're very memorable. So, I wouldn't rank them quite as high in that regard. Nami and her grandfather are probably the most memorable for me because they're Okinawan and they do a lot of strange, out of the ordinary things. Yeah. But yeah, otherwise they're not terrible, but they're, they aren't great either. I don't know. I don't know how you feel about it.
I do think the Okinawan royal family are the most compelling characters. But I also think, again, I may have seen this movie too many times to be objective about this.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Yeah.
Because even if I don't know the characters' names, I know who they are and what roles they fill. And to me, that is, again, this is a fairy tale and it's casted with stock characters.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this movie so many times to the point that my family sees all giant monster movies in the lens of this one. There are 2 Godzilla movies with the princess in them, right? Like this one and Ghidorah.
Yes.
And my mom, to this day, considers the princess one of the stock characters of a Godzilla movie.
That's interesting.
So to me, this is very much an ensemble cast, and it's an ensemble cast of stock characters, which I don't have a problem with.
No, I don't have
Because
a problem with it either.
To me, this is not the story of these archaeologists trying to solve this mystery. This is the story of Godzilla having a crisis of identity.
Yeah. Yeah. As we unpacked earlier. Yeah. And I feel like this movie might have been my introduction to the concept of day for night.
Ah, yeah. There's some great day for night
on the ship on there, because I remember little Nate watching this and they're talking about this being, you know, oh, this is such a great night for romance or whatever. Or in the dub, it was on a night like this, you should talk about love, you know? And I'm like,
That's right.
and I'm like, wait a minute. It looks really bright outside for night. I'm pretty sure that's the sun being reflected on the ocean. What?
I just figured it was a full moon. Like, again, I was way too trusting when I saw this.
Yeah, but then now looking at it now, like it's day for night. Yeah. They put a filter on it, probably because they probably couldn't film it at night and make it look good. And it's just, at least it's not Crater Lake Monster where they forgot to put the filter on. So it's broad daylight and they're acting like it's still at night. Whoops.
Whoops, indeed.
At least they remembered the filter.
Jeez, man. I haven't seen Crater Lake Monster in a long time.
Oh,
that used to be everywhere. Like in box sets and on the internet. Like, that's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, also our bad guys have death chambers. That's not calling back to anything.
No.
Not at all.
Not at all. Death chambers, that's not a thing that's ever...
Where they have saunas of death.
You know, I could go for a sauna.
A sauna of death?
Maybe not of death, but... I could use a sauna, I could use a massage.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it cracked me up because in the dub, he said, Harada says, oh no, they're going to scald us to death. And then in the Criterion subtitles say, they're going to cook us alive. And I just keep thinking of how that's a popular phrase now with Zoomers. He's like, you're cooked.
Yeah.
Well, they're literally cooked in this. But thankfully, our heroes, one of whom is just an archaeologist, but because he's Japanese, apparently he just knows karate. And, helps the Interpol agent break into there wearing uniforms and somehow knows how to turn the thing off. Oh, well.
Yeah. Well, he's been there helping rebuild Mechagodzilla. He's learned it all.
Apparently he has.
All of it.
All of it. Well, like I said, there's a lot to get into about this movie. We've gotten into a lot about it. But if you want to learn more, check out my notes on Patreon. I think it's high time we started wrapping things up, Robert.
Yeah, probably.
I know. We got to stop talking about your favorite Godzilla movie.
Well, while that's true, at the very least, we got to talk about it.
Yes. Yes, we did.
And I'm very, very glad that we got to talk about it. And I'm very glad I just happened to be still here in London.
Yes. Funny how that happens. Just make sure you get back to Texas safely.
Yes, I should be leaving shortly.
Yeah, well, like I said, we got to wrap things up. All right, still no listener feedback this week, at least not a lot. I should probably check the YouTube channel again just to be safe. Maybe for the next episode, which it would actually be if listener feedback would be pretty conducive to the next episode. I won't telegraph too much. But now, all this talk about Patreon, Robert.
Oh,
that means for all of the paid members, I've been getting a lot of free members now. I'm like, that's cool, guys. But if you want the shout outs, you got to at least get to, the first paid tier. Just saying, fellas and ladies. I don't know. I can only see usernames. I don't know. Some of them could be ladies. Well, I know some of them are ladies. Some of the ones on the paid ones are ladies. But anyway, it's time for the Patreon shout outs. Tired of making this weird. Yeah.
I shall ask thee once again, will you chant my name?
Danny the Mana!
Damon Noise, our executive producer.
The Cellcast!
Eric Anderson.
Winja the Ninja!
Christopher Reiner.
The indiscreet one.
Or is it indiscreet one? I need to know. I've been asking for months. Please explain yourself, sir. Or madam. Whoever you are. Redeemed Otaku!
Eli Harris.
Jay Cambrick, one of my two co-hosts on Henshin Power V3, along with Christopher Reiner.
Matt Walsh. But not that Matt Walsh.
Definitely not that Matt Walsh. He gets in trouble for his own name. I'm not kidding you. Jonathan Cartwright.
Leon Campbell.
Michael Watson.
Edwin Gonzalez.
Eric Pearl.
Sam Allred.
Tofu Fury! Come to me, lightning! Come to me! Are you a magnet now?
Let me see. No.
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 What was the line? What was the line again? He's turned himself into a magnetic pole. That's such a wonderful out of context line. Godzilla doing that is, as the kids would say, out of pocket. But even the line about it, of course, he has turned himself into a magnetic pole. We need more earnest.
I read your book.
We need more earnest, cheesy Godzilla movies, or just earnest, cheesy movies in general.
Yeah.
I'm so sick of everything being ironic. Give me some. That's why Pacific Rim worked so well, because it was earnest. It was kind of goofy, but it was earnest.
And we also got the fantastic, horrible line readings from Charlie Hunnam on some of the best bad dialogue in the world.
But I've already talked about Pacific Rim. Go listen to that episode. But speaking of episodes, next up, which is where I'll probably check the YouTubes and get any comments for the YouTube versions of these episodes to talk about, or listen to the credits, and you can learn not only how you can become a member of MIFE Max on Patreon to get shout-outs like we just did, but also send us emails that will be read on the show. You can contribute to discussions on the show. You just have to contact us. So, next up...
You can even contact me.
Yes!
And I'll send it forward to Nate.
Yeah. Or you could try to convince him to relaunch Record All Monsters, because I miss it.
I appreciate that, and as soon as there is some time for me, I'm still writing for Record All Monsters.
Yeah, well, I'm still waiting for you to use the recovered lost Inframan audio and put it out.
I thank you. Yes, thank you. And I edit that for about 1 minute a week.
So you will get it up in approximately 2050. Got it.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, next episode I do will actually be a solo bonus episode continuing the British leg of the Monster Island World Tour. And this one will be over the giant behemoth.
Oh,
Which every time I say that, it just sounds like a redundant title, but okay.
so the giant behemoth. That's one I really enjoyed. Actually, I know.
Which has the same director as Gorgo.
So I did an episode on the giant behemoth way back in my first season with our guest was Derek Cook from Monster Kid Radio. And we both really enjoyed it. I think it might be the first kaiju giant monster movie where we see them swimming underwater, because we see Godzilla walking underwater a couple times, but we actually see the monster behemoth swimming, undulating under the water.
Interesting.
Eugene Laurier, the director there, he also directed The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Which I've done an episode about that one.
And Gorgo, like you said, but also a movie that I was shocked to find called The Colossus of New York. Which he only directed the 4 movies. And I wound up in the process of doing Record All Monsters, watching all 4 of them, and I came to really appreciate his work as a director.
I guess I better add Colossus of New York to the list just to complete the set.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a great quality Blu-ray by Olive Films that is as bare bones as they come and a little too expensive, but it looks gorgeous.
Yeah, I can work with that.
Really good too. Sounds really good.
Yeah. Which, speaking of Gorgo, that will be the next mainline World Tour episode that I do. So I will have covered all of the 1962 European kaiju movies in the span of a couple of months, because I would have gotten Gorgo, and then the same year we had Reptilicus and Konga.
And Konga, which was the last one you and I talked about with Courtney when she went back to the States. Yep.
Shameless self-promotion. So my guest for that will most likely be my friend Bex from Redeemed Otaku, and I'm going to have to work my magic a little bit, but I'm going to try to get Kaiju Kim on that episode as well. She likes Gorgo.
Future Nate popping in here. Unfortunately, I was unable to get Kaiju Kim on the Gorgo episode because she was incredibly busy with a lot of other things, but I did manage to make arrangements for Bex to bring her wonderful husband, Tim, on here, making his first mainline MIFE episode appearance. And now, back to the show.
Well, if need be, I might still be around.
Okay, I'll keep it in mind.
Because as a Fenian, as an Irish American, I love to see an Irish monster of folklore destroying British monuments.
Yeah, well, you're a better half Irishman than the other. Well, Scotsman, I should say. You're a better half Scotsman than one that I know back on the island. So much grief. But I am planning on actually researching British-Scottish relations, because that's actually at least hinted at in the movie, because that tension exists in it.
It is Irish in Gorgo.
Is it? I thought it was Scottish.
Oh, believe me, it's Irish.
Oh, well, I'm very wrong.
But there is a lot of that tension in turning Gorgo over to the British government.
Yeah.
And I tie it partially to Grace O'Malley, who was a historical figure who the Fenians in the 1916 Easter Rising and leading up to that, they turned her into kind of a semi-mythical person and used her Gaelic name, which would have been Gran Michael. And I kind of associate Ogra with Grace O'Malley, and that.
Interesting.
Yeah, having that stand, I'm generally, it's very interesting.
For sure. And then it's crazy to think this, but we will be coming to the final after that one, the final episode for the World Tour.
You've almost done it, man.
I know, I've almost done it. And here's the thing that's weird about this one. It's a British film that takes place in Mexico, which means we're hopping across the pond to go to Mexico, because that's where those monsters are that we have to recapture as part of this glorified fetch quest the board sent us on.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
I do know where you're going.
Oh, what's
And
that?
Down to catch some monsters.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but Gareth Edwards' Monsters.
Yeah, that's what I was what I was doing.
Yeah, the movie that got him Godzilla 2014.
Yeah. You'll be in my neck of the woods, but I'm not going down there.
I don't blame you. Mike, and I will have 2 guests on for that one if things go as planned. I will have Brandon T. McClure, formerly of Fake Nerds Podcasts, and Mitch McGee of the podcast Entertain This.
Another quick correction here from Future Nate. I was unable to get Brandon McClure, unfortunately, on for that episode, but Mitch McGee was able to join us, and he brought along his similarly named friend and co-host from Entertain This, Hayden Brandon. And now, once again, back to the show.
So, it should be an interesting one. It's a fascinating little movie, especially when you start digging into the making of, and how apparently it would, like, the craziest thing I found out about it was that it didn't have a real script. It had basically an outline, and Gareth Edwards would tell the actors, here's what needs to happen in this scene, make it up.
It's like a D&D campaign.
Yeah. Which is why the dialogue sounds weirdly natural when you listen to it. It's because the actors are just improvising the entire time based on certain criteria. It's wild. It is wild. All right. And now we come to the all-important shameless self-promotion. So, what do you got for us, Robert?
Okay. I've got quite a bit going on right now. You can, of course, listen to the entire back catalog of Record All Monsters. Just go to your favorite podcatcher and type in Record All Monsters. If you follow us on any of our social medias, you can also find our link tree. And on our link tree, you will find our website, the feed of all our episodes, as well as guest spots we've had as they release. That's the Record All Monsters side of things. You can also buy my book, Record All Monsters, the book of the essays from the podcast. And you'll be able to read the Godzilla and Me, A Lifetime of Friendship in the Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla chapter. You can also listen to that on Record All Monsters. We also have a YouTube channel where you can find all of those. I don't make any money from that one, though, so buy the book or listen to the podcast feed. As a matter of fact, I just got paid $1 for my royalties from the last month for the book. Whole shiny dollar. And that's that front. Oh, one more Record All Monsters thing. I'm still writing at, Substack. Record All Monsters on Substack. I just put out an article, not a couple weeks ago maybe, on Gamera the Brave.
Oh, I love Gamera the Brave.
And I've always done music a little bit part-time. I'm focusing on that a little bit more right now while I'm trying to get the energy and resources for season 3 of Record All Monsters. So I have a single coming out. I don't know when this episode is coming out, but if it's after January 24th, you can type in my name, Robert Kelly, on your Spotify or whatever, Apple Music, whatever soulless conglomerate charges you a monthly fee to listen to music. You can type in my name, and the name of the song is Scared to Death. That's going to be the first single. I have been playing this song for years, and I have a great band on it. The lead guitarist from the Oh Hellos, the bass player from Bonsai Nation, and the drummer from the Zach Walter Band backing me up. And they're all fantastic. Yeah, I'm proud of it, and I hope you will like it. Mm-hmm. And any other shameless self-promotion? No.
Yeah, okay.
Not for me. Not for me. Although I'll say, watch this movie and think harder about it than you think you ought to.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So just to go over mine really quick, listen to the credits for all the MIFE related stuff. Also check out my other podcast, Henshin Power V3, where three friends have 3 minutes to talk about tokusatsu. If you're into Henshin Hero TV for the most part, go check that out. We are in the we've been going through the original Ultraman and Kamen Rider V3. Soon we're going to be going over the Guyver animes. I'm not sure I'm prepared for that, but that's coming up. Also, check out my author website, nathanjsmarchen.com, where you can check out my kaiju books, like I mentioned, Attack of the Kaiju Volume 2. That's an anthology I contributed to, as well as my own kaiju novella, Destroyer, which I co-authored with Timothy Deal and Natasha Hayden, and Giant Bug Cinema, where I contributed an essay which, by the way, that book got nominated for a Rondo, which is kind of a big deal. And my essay in that was on, because I came into the project late and nobody else wanted this, I got Monster from Green Hell.
Hey!
Giant wasps in Africa in the 1950s. There you go. It'll get covered on the podcast at some point, I'm sure. And also go check. I'm a contributing writer to Kaiju United, the premier kaiju website on the internet. So go on there and check that. I write a lot of comic book reviews for them, and I should probably send them a few more. I'm also a member of the stable of actors for Scyther Inc. Productions, which is a conglomerate or whatever group, I guess it would be a better way to put it, that makes fan-produced audio dramas. I most notoriously play my former roommate, the skeletal supervillain Rito, on Power Rangers, the audio drama. And I have played, of all people, Deadpool on the X-Men audio drama, although so far I've only been a post-credit gag. But I've been told once he is a proper character, I will get a callback. And I am Johnny Storm, baby, on the Avengers audio drama, because they do crossovers with the Fantastic Four. So there you go. Give all of those a listen. All right. Thank you once again, Robert, for joining me on this. I knew you were the perfect guy to have on for this episode. And, I look forward to podcasting with you again, whether it's on my show or hopefully again on yours.
My show will come back sometime. I guarantee it. Did you know that there are a lot of things happening in the world right now?
Yes, quite a few. Quite a few. All right. Yes, I'll wrap it up. Jeez, you've been remarkably quiet this week. All right, Jet. Cue the credits. Thank you for listening to the Monster Island Film Vault, a podcast produced and hosted by Nate Marchand. Our executive producer is Damon Noyes. If you want to be heard on the show, we'd love to hear from you, so email us at monsterislandfilmvault@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. You can also follow Jimmy from NASA on Twitter and our many colorful characters using the links in the show notes, which are on our website, monsterislandfilmvault.com. Don't forget to join our official Facebook group and Discord server, The Markalite Lounge. Our podcast logo was designed by Rebecca Hudgens. Follow her on Twitter and Instagram at super_r_illustrations. Sound effects sourced from freesound.org and created by JP Gant. Our theme song is Wanderer on the Offensive, live edit by B33J, Sarax, Juan Madrano, and Nonsensical Lexus, which is a remix of Counterattack and The Opened Way by Kowatani from Shadow of the Colossus. Additional music includes Every Country Has a Monster, performed by Jonah Ray, and Chant My Name, a cover by Second Archive of the song by Masaki Endo. All film and audio clips belong to their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended or implied.
Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and/or Podchaser to spread the word about the show. You can even support us by joining MIFV Max on Patreon. MIFV is a Moonlighting Ninjas media production and a proud member of Pod Nation. Sayonara!